Silence. A deep, impenetrable silence that is not disturbed by the wind, the current of rivers, or the voices of birds. Only sometimes it is interrupted by the slight rustle of sand shifted by time, or the barely audible creak of stones slowly settling under the weight of thousands of years. This is the silence of oblivion that once enveloped great cities, powerful civilizations, and amazing discoveries. We stand on the threshold of this silent expanse, where every stone, every grain of sand contains echoes of the past, whispers of long-gone voices, stories that once determined the course of human destiny. Here, under the Earth's surface, in the depths of the oceans, and in the most inaccessible mountains, lie not just ruins, but mute witnesses of incredible achievements, revolutionary ideas, and sudden disappearances. These places are not just archaeological sites. They are time capsules buried under layers of history, waiting to speak again. The world that we consider familiar and explored constantly challenges our perceptions. The story, seemingly set in stone and written in scrolls, is actually a living, breathing organism that changes with each new discovery. Archaeological finds are not just ancient artifacts. They are clues that can rewrite entire chapters of our history, refute established theories, and open up new, exciting perspectives on humanity's past. They force us to rethink our roots, our achievements, and even our vision for the future. We'll take you on a journey through 50 of these discoveries, from hidden cities to mysterious writings, from ancient technologies to evidence of contacts that seemingly couldn't exist. Each of them is a separate story about the triumph of the human mind and the inexorable passage of time, about great civilizations that have sunk into oblivion, and about unexpected proofs of their existence. Get ready, because the veil over the past is about to open, and what we see can change our view of the world forever. Göbekli Tepe, the cradle of civilization, moved. Imagine a place where a person who has not yet mastered metals, who did not know wheels and did not build permanent homes, erects monumental structures that are striking in their complexity and artistic execution. A place that was created thousands of years before Stonehenge and even before the first farming communities appeared. Such a place is Göbekli Tepe, a mysterious complex located in the southeast of modern Turkey. Its heyday occurred in the Neolithic era, approximately 9600–8200 years BC. At a time when traditional ideas about human development suggested a nomadic lifestyle and primitive settlements, Göbekli Tepe appeared as a stunning proof that man already had a complex social structure, religious beliefs, and the ability to large-scale collective work. Its key feature is its massive T-shaped limestone monoliths, some of which reach 6 meters in height and weigh up to 60 tons. These megaliths are set in circular enclosures decorated with elaborately carved bas-reliefs of wild animals, snakes, foxes, wild boars, birds, and insects. It is striking that these images are not of a domestic nature. They are symbolic, indicating a developed mythology and possibly early forms of worship. The sacred significance of Göbekli Tepe is obvious. It was not a city or settlement in the usual sense, but an ancient temple complex, a place of pilgrimage or ritual meetings. The absence of permanent water sources or traces of long-term residents confirms this hypothesis. Moreover, these structures were not just erected, but also deliberately buried under a thick layer of earth after several hundred years of use that added another mystery to their history. Who and why decided to bury such a grandiose work? The great secret of Göbekli Tepe. Why was the temple buried? The main mystery of Göbekli Tepe lies not only in its unexpected appearance, but also in its deliberate and systematic burial. This monumental complex, created by the efforts of dozens or even hundreds of people over the centuries, was covered with huge amounts of earth and garbage. There is no clear evidence of destruction as a result of natural disasters, wars, or cultural decline. On the contrary, everything points to organized and purposeful action. Why did the ancient people, who invested so much effort and resources in creating this sanctuary, decide to bury it, hiding it from future generations? This lack of logical explanation is the main mystery. Traditional hypotheses try to explain this phenomenon based on the known Neolithic social and cultural shifts. One theory suggests that the burial was part of a ritual act, possibly related to a change of beliefs or cycles. Just as modern civilizations sometimes bury old ideas or technologies, perhaps ancient people believed that a dead sacred structure should be buried with honors. Another hypothesis is related to climate change or the depletion of resources that led to population migration. However, this does not explain purposeful burial. People would simply abandon it. The third version considers this as a way of preservation. Perhaps the ancient builders wanted to protect their sacred buildings from enemies or from the destruction of time by creating a kind of capsule. But even this seems unconvincing, given the effort expended. Unconventional hypotheses go deeper into the realm of assumptions. Some researchers suggest that the burial could be related to cosmic events. For example, with the fall of a comet or asteroid, which, according to some sources, occurred about 10,900 years ago, although before the construction of Göbekli Tepe. Perhaps it was some kind of redemption or an attempt to appease the higher powers after the disaster. There are also versions related to deliberate concealment of knowledge. Perhaps the Göbekli Tepe contained information or artifacts that were supposed to be hidden from prying eyes or from future, unworthy generations. Legends and legends about lost knowledge or about the great catastrophes that led to the reset of civilization could find here a kind of confirmation. Some even suggest that the burial was an act of karmic retribution or the consequence of some mistakes made by ancient humanity, for which they decided to pay by destroying their great creation. Regardless of which hypothesis is correct, the Göbekli Tepe mystery remains one of the most intriguing mysteries of archaeology, forcing us to rethink the very beginning of civilization. Atlantis in the Mediterranean, the secret of the Minoan civilization and the eruption of Thera. The Mediterranean Sea, the cradle of civilizations, holds countless stories of greatness and fall in its depths and on its islands. One of the most mysterious and brilliant is the Minoan civilization, which flourished in the Bronze Age, approximately 2700–1450 BC. It originated on the island of Crete and reached incredible heights in art, architecture, maritime trade, and social organization, long before the dawn of classical Greece. Unlike many other cultures of the time, the Minoans seemed to live in a world without fortifications, with their cities open to all winds, indicating their dominance of the sea and possibly peaceful nature. Their key features are amazing. This is, first of all, the palace architecture, represented by such masterpieces as the Palace of Knossos. These palaces were not just the residences of rulers. They served as administrative, religious, and economic centers, representing complex complexes of hundreds of rooms, multi-level structures, frescoes with vivid images of bulls, dolphins, and processions, as well as complex water and sewer systems that were thousands of years ahead of their time. The Minoans developed two writing systems, Linear A and Linear B. Linear B was successfully deciphered and turned out to be an early form of Greek. But Linear A, it still remains a mystery, representing one of the greatest linguistic mysteries. Their culture was deeply connected to the sea, as evidenced by images of ships, sea creatures, and their extensive trading network that spanned the entire Mediterranean, from Egypt to the Middle East. The cult of the bull, acrobatic games with bulls, and female deities played a central role in their religious life. The Minoans, in fact, created the first great European civilization, whose influence extended far beyond Crete. Their sophistication and wealth were legendary, which gave rise to myths about the Golden Age and the peaceful rule of Minos. They were true masters of their craft, leaving behind not just ruins, but traces of a high culture that seemed to exist in harmony with nature and themselves. But then, all of a sudden, that glorious era came to an end, leaving behind only questions and fragments of former greatness. The lost Atlantis and the ashes of Thera, the mystery of the Minoan demise. The main mystery surrounding Minoan civilization lies in its sudden and catastrophic decline, which occurred around the middle of the 15th century BC. This highly developed culture, seemingly at the peak of its power, disappeared from the annals of history almost overnight, leaving behind only ruins and unsolved writing. What exactly led to such complete oblivion? The lack of clear, unambiguous reasons and evidence has long stirred the minds of researchers, generating many hypotheses. The traditional or rational hypotheses mostly converge on one key event, the catastrophic eruption of Mount Thera, present-day Santorini, located about 110 kilometers north of Crete. This eruption, one of the most powerful in the history of mankind, threw billions of tons of ash and rocks into the atmosphere, causing global climate change, giant tsunamis, and devastating earthquakes. Waves up to 60 meters high could hit the coasts of Crete, destroying ports, fleets, and coastal towns, as well as flooding fertile land. The fallout of volcanic ash could make the soil unsuitable for farming for many years, leading to famine and social collapse. This theory sounds convincing, explaining the suddenness and scale of the destruction. In addition, the weakened Minoan civilization may have been finished off by the invasion of external forces, possibly the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, who, according to archaeological evidence, captured Crete shortly after the eruption and probably adopted some Minoan achievements, including linear writing, transforming it into linear B. Economic changes, such as disruption of trade routes or depletion of natural resources, could also have played a role, although they could not explain such a sudden and complete collapse. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses closely link the demise of the Minoan civilization with the legend of Atlantis. Plato's dialogues describe a powerful island empire that was swallowed up by the sea in one day and one night in a catastrophic event. Many researchers see the Terra and Minoan civilizations as the prototype of Plato's Atlantis, suggesting that the Greek myths may have been a distorted memory of this real cataclysm. This gives the story a mystical twist, suggesting that the death of the Minoans was not just a natural disaster, but part of some divine retribution or karmic consequence of their own arrogance or unrighteousness. As is often the case in ancient legends about lost civilizations, there are theories about the deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that the Minoans possessed technologies that were either lost in the disaster or were hidden from the world. The legends of the Minotaur, the labyrinth, and the sacrifices may be metaphorical reflections of some hidden rituals or secret knowledge that disappeared with civilization. Eventually, some even speculate that the Minoans may have encountered an extraterrestrial influence that either abandoned them or caused their demise. Legends and myths, they play a key role in filling in the white spots of this story. The myth of King Minos, his power, the golden age of Crete, and the subsequent collapse is probably an echo of the real history of Minoan civilization. Legends of floods, deluges, and lost islands are found in many Mediterranean cultures, which may be an echo of the mega tsunami caused by the eruption of Thera. These traditions, passed down from generation to generation, not only preserve the memory of the great catastrophe, but also give it a sacred, almost mystical meaning. They transform the death of the Minoans from a purely geological event into a cautionary tale about the fragility of human power in the face of the elements or even divine wrath. The mystery of the demise of the Minoan civilization remains one of the most fascinating in archaeology. Was it a purely natural phenomenon, or is there more to it than that? A lesson for humanity about the transitory nature of everything on Earth. Could this have been the real event that gave rise to the myth of Atlantis? And is there still undiscovered evidence that will confirm once and for all the connection between myth and reality? Deciphering the Rosetta Stone voices of ancient Egypt. Imagine a world where one of the greatest civilizations of mankind, ancient Egypt, exists only as a collection of majestic ruins and bizarre images, the meaning of which is lost to posterity. For thousands of years, the hieroglyphs that covered the walls of temples, tombs, and obelisks remained silent witnesses of forgotten knowledge, inaccessible to understanding. It was a state of profound oblivion in which the beliefs, history, and daily life of one of the most influential cultures were submerged. For a long time, it was believed that hieroglyphs are only symbolic images and not a full-fledged writing system capable of transmitting sounds and words. This made Egypt the target of endless speculation and hoaxes, making it impossible for the world to communicate directly with its past. The heyday of this topic, or rather the heyday of understanding it, came with the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. Discovered in 1799 by Napoleon's soldiers in the Egyptian city of Rosetta, now Rashid, this granodiorite stele turned out to be a real archaeological treasure. Its key feature and main miracle was that the same text was carved on it in 3 different scripts: ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Egyptian Demotic script, a later and simplified form of writing, and ancient Greek. The latter, being a well-known European scientist, became the key to the solution. The Rosetta Stone was created in 196 BC by the priests of Ptolemy V Epiphanes and contains a decree confirming the cult of the king. Its sacred significance stems from its content, which dealt with religious rites, taxes, and royal privileges, but its true significance for the history of mankind has immeasurably exceeded its original purpose. It was the key to deciphering a language that had been silent for almost 1,500 years. The appearance of the Rosetta Stone marked the beginning of a new era in Egyptology. For the first time, after many centuries of oblivion, there is a real opportunity to understand the messages left by the pharaohs. This was a turning point that changed the whole course of the study of ancient Egypt, turning it from a subject of speculation to a field of serious scientific research. Without it, we might still be trapped in speculation, deprived of direct access to the voices of the past. Locked in stone, a voice from the ages, how the Rosetta Stone rewrote Egyptian history. The main mystery that the Rosetta Stone solved was not what it contained, but how it contained it. It was the key to understanding hieroglyphs, the very essence of Egyptian writing. Prior to its discovery, scientists were confused when trying to understand the nature of hieroglyphs. Many believed that these were purely symbolic images, ideograms that conveyed whole concepts and not phonetic sounds. This fundamental error prevented any progress in decryption. Thus, the lack of a clear understanding of the writing system made ancient Egypt deaf and dumb for researchers. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the deciphering of hieroglyphs before the Rosetta Stone were based on erroneous assumptions. Scientists have tried to find a direct meaning in each sign, ignoring the possibility of phonetic meaning. It was only thanks to the Rosetta Stone and the genius of Jean-François Champollion, who spent years studying it, that a breakthrough was made. Champollion, comparing the Greek text with the hieroglyphic and demotic, came to a revolutionary conclusion. Hieroglyphs were not purely ideographic. They were a complex system combining ideographic, phonetic, and determinative signs. That is, some signs denoted sounds, like letters, others whole words or concepts, and still others served to clarify the meaning of previous signs. The discovery that hieroglyphs could be phonetic was the eureka that opened the door to the world of ancient Egypt. It allowed us to read the names of pharaohs, gods, and simple texts, and then more complex narratives captured on papyri and monuments. The political struggle for decryption rights between European powers, particularly France and Great Britain, only served to emphasize the importance of this discovery. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses before deciphering often linked Egyptian hieroglyphs to hermetic knowledge, secret magical symbols, or even messages left by highly advanced, possibly extraterrestrial civilizations. Many occultists and esotericists saw them as clues to ancient wisdom hidden from the uninitiated. There was an idea that hieroglyphs were not intended for simple reading, but were part of some sacred ritual or way of communicating with the divine. Some believed that they were encrypted prophecies or hidden truths about the universe, accessible only to a select few. These beliefs were supported by the fact that the writing system seemed so complex and mysterious that ordinary earthly explanations seemed insufficient. Champollion's decoding, though scientifically sound, did not completely dispel these mystical auras for everyone, but it certainly moved the study of ancient Egypt from the realm of esotericism to the realm of strict science. Legends, and myth stories about ancient Egypt, such as stories about the wisdom of the priests, the power of the pharaohs, the secrets of the pyramids and the afterlife, began to take on a new meaning after deciphering. These traditions, which were previously perceived as echoes of vague myths, could now be confirmed or refuted by real texts. For example, myths about the gods and their deeds recorded in the books of the dead or on the walls of temples could now be read in the original, giving an unprecedented insight into the religious beliefs of the Egyptians. The decoding also allowed scientists to reconstruct the chronology of events, identify the pharaohs, and understand the political, social, and economic structure of ancient Egyptian society. The myth of the lost knowledge of Egypt, which was encrypted and inaccessible, was not entirely accurate. The knowledge was there, just the key to it was lost until the Rosetta Stone returned it to us. So the Rosetta Stone didn't just open up language, it rewrote the history of ancient Egypt, giving it back its voice and allowing us to hear its messages directly, bypassing centuries of oblivion. He showed that the past is not silent if we know how to listen. Neanderthals. Rewriting the history of thinking. For a long time in the mass consciousness and even in the scientific community, Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, were presented as crude primitive creatures living in caves, having limited mental abilities and standing at a significantly lower stage of development compared to anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens. This stereotype, formed at the beginning of the 20th century on the basis of early and incomplete finds, painted a picture of creatures capable only of survival, but devoid of complex thinking, art, symbolism, and, most importantly, the ability to use complex language. They were considered a dead-end branch of evolution, which disappeared under the onslaught of more advanced Cro-Magnons. This former fame of the Neanderthal as cavemen was more of a curse than a blessing, masking the true grandeur and complexity of their culture. Their current state of obscurity, or more precisely, delusion, consisted of a complete disregard for their cognitive abilities and cultural achievements. However, recent decades of archaeological discoveries have radically rewritten the history of Neanderthals, turning them from primitive creatures into complex and multifaceted hominids with striking intellectual and cultural characteristics. Their flourishing as a subject of reinvention began with the discovery of new evidence that challenged old paradigms. Key features now attributed to Neanderthals include the use of sophisticated tools, not just a chopper, but specialized tools for butchering meat, processing hides and wood, which indicates advanced planning and cognitive abilities. Fire control, not just using natural fire, but also maintaining it and possibly breeding it. This indicates the complexity of organizing everyday life and social life. Big game hunting is evidence of collective hunting of mammoths, woolly rhinos, and other large animals, which requires coordination, strategy, and communication. But the most startling discoveries were the evidence of their symbolic thinking. Finds from caves such as Minoan in Spain have shown that Neanderthals used shells with pigments for coloring, created beads from shells and bones, and used the feathers of birds of prey for decoration. These artifacts, dating back tens of thousands of years before anatomically modern humans arrived in Europe, clearly indicate the presence of an aesthetic sense and symbolic self-expression. Even more striking are the findings from the Brunicle Cave in France, where circular structures created from stalagmites dating back 176,000 years were discovered. These structures, located deep underground, could not serve as a shelter and presumably had a ritual or ceremonial significance, which indicates a developed spiritual life. In addition, evidence of burials has been found, often with funerary offerings, indicating the existence of representations of an afterlife, or at least of compassion and concern for the dead. Some Neanderthal remains show healed fractures and serious injuries, which indicates the care of sick and injured members of the group. Thus, Neanderthals are no longer seen as just surviving hominids, but as culturally complex creatures whose lives were rich in symbolism, social connections, and perhaps even displays of art and religion. This insight completely reverses our understanding of the cradle of human thought and culture, showing that Homo sapiens was not the only species capable of such achievements. The mystery of the Neanderthal extinction, not war, but assimilation. The main mystery surrounding the Neanderthals was their sudden disappearance. $40,000, $28,000, a few hundred years ago, shortly after the arrival of anatomically modern humans in Europe. For a long time, this lack of clear, unambiguous reasons for their disappearance gave rise to many theories, most of which focused on the idea of the complete displacement or even destruction of Neanderthals. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the reasons for the disappearance of Neanderthals were based on the idea of their inability to compete with Homo sapiens. It was believed that Cro-Magnons had advantages in technology, more advanced weapons, throwing weapons, social organization, large groups, developed exchange networks, communication, full-fledged language, and cognitive abilities, more effective planning, adaptation to new conditions. According to this view, Homo sapiens, being more intelligent and efficient, simply pushed Neanderthals out of their ecological niches, depriving them of resources and forcing them to die out. Climate change, while not the sole cause, was also seen as a contributing factor, especially during periods of extreme cold, to which Neanderthals may have been less adapted than the migrants who arrived. Direct competition for resources was also expected, and hunting grounds, which could lead to conflicts and the weakening of Neanderthal populations. However, these theories did not fully explain why a species that had thrived for hundreds of thousands of years in a variety of environments suddenly disappeared. Unconventional or reinterpreted hypotheses that have emerged from new genetic and archaeological evidence offer a much more complex picture. The most revolutionary discovery was the confirmation of interbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Analysis of modern human DNA has shown that all humans, except sub-Saharan Africans, contain between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. This is direct evidence that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals not only competed, but also interbred, and their offspring were viable. This completely refutes the idea of pure extinction and highlights the hypothesis of assimilation or absorption. Instead of being completely wiped out, Neanderthals may have gradually integrated into Homo sapiens populations, their genes dissolving into much larger groups of migrants. They may have been a minority that gradually assimilated, passing on their genes and perhaps even some cultural practices to new generations. This hypothesis of assimilation is supported by other facts. For example, some archaeological finds show that Neanderthals adopted some of the technologies and innovations of Homo sapiens, such as more sophisticated tools or symbolic ornaments, which indicates cultural exchange rather than complete isolation or hostility. It is possible that the last groups of Neanderthals simply dissolved into the more numerous and mobile populations of Homo sapiens and did not die out as a result of direct struggle or inability to adapt. The lack of records of destruction or a logical explanation for events such as mass exterminations is now interpreted not as evidence of their primitiveness, but as evidence that their disappearance was a more complex process than a simple displacement. Legends, and myths in the context of Neanderthals, they are often absent or extremely vague, as they disappeared long before the advent of writing. However, some folk creatures such as forest people, yetis, or wild people in some cultures may be very distant, distorted memories of encounters with other hominid species that coexisted with our ancestors. These untranslated myths about other people may be very faint but still echo ancient interactions. Perhaps the most significant tradition is the very fact of our Neanderthal genetic heritage, which is living proof of their existence and their contribution to our own biology. So the mystery of the Neanderthal extinction is no longer reduced to the question, why did they become extinct? But rather to, how did they disappear? And what contribution did they make to our legacy? This discovery changes not only the history of mankind, but also our understanding of what it means to be human. Prehistoric giants, megalithic structures, and the mystery of their purpose. Imagine a world where a person who does not yet know writing, wheels, complex mechanisms, or advanced metallurgy is able to move and install stone blocks weighing tens or even hundreds of tons, creating monumental structures that have survived for thousands of years. We are talking about megalithic complexes from the famous Stonehenge in England to the mysterious Karnak stones in France, from Maltese temples to the dolmens of the Caucasus. These colossal stone structures, built during the Neolithic and Bronze Age, approximately 5000–1500 BC, challenge our understanding of the possibilities of prehistoric societies. Their fame lies not only in their physical scale, but also in the fact that they are some of the earliest evidence of monumental construction and collective labor in human history. Their current state of obscurity, or rather misunderstanding, is the lack of clear explanations for their purpose, construction methods, and how such seemingly primitive cultures could have carried out such grandiose engineering projects. Behind each of these silent stones lies an untold story about faith, knowledge, and social organization. The flourishing of these megalithic cultures was amazing. Key features of these structures include monumental size. Some Stonehenge stones weigh up to 45 tons, and on the Hump Plateau in Lebanon, there is a block weighing more than 1,000 tons, although it is not part of the megalithic complex in the European sense, but illustrates the possibilities of moving giant stones by the ancients. Astronomical orientation. Many megaliths, such as Stonehenge or Newgrange in Ireland, precisely oriented by sunrise and sunset on the solstices and equinoxes. This indicates a deep knowledge of astronomy and probably the use of these structures as ancient observatories or calendars. Complex engineering. Moving and installing such huge stones required not only a huge labor force, but also developed methods of lifting, transporting, and precise adjustment, which implies the presence of complex systems of levers, rollers, ropes, etc., perhaps even construction ramps, which we have no direct evidence of. The sacred significance of these megaliths is indisputable. They weren't just dwellings. Many of them served as burial chambers, dolmens, mounds, places of rituals and ceremonies, cromlechs, stone circles, or were symbols of power and unity communities. The presence of rock carvings, spirals, and symbols of the sun and moon inside or near megaliths highlights their deep connection to religious beliefs and the cult of fertility, death, and rebirth. For example, the inner chambers of Newgrange are illuminated only once a year. At the dawn of the winter solstice, when a ray of sunlight penetrates through a special hole, which clearly has a mystical and symbolic meaning associated with the cycles of life and death. These were not just stones, but peculiar stone temples under the open sky, centers of social and spiritual life that united tribes in vast territories. Their construction required a great deal of effort and coordination, indicating that there was a complex social structure, perhaps with religious leaders or leaders capable of organizing and motivating hundreds of people to do such a titanic job. Whispers of stone colossi, secrets of construction and forgotten knowledge. The main mystery surrounding megalithic structures is the lack of clear and complete explanations of their construction methods, as well as the lack of written evidence that could reveal their true purpose and meaning for those who erected them. How could prehistoric humans, without modern technology, move and lift these giant rocks? Why did they put so much effort into creating these monuments? The lack of clear, unambiguous reasons for their appearance and disappearance of many traditions associated with them gives rise to many hypotheses. Traditional or rational hypotheses about megalith construction methods focus on the use of primitive but effective technologies. It is believed that the stones were moved on wooden rollers using levers and ropes, which were probably made of leather or plant fibers. For lifting heavy blocks, earth ramps or systems of linings and levers were used, gradually lifting the stone to the desired height. Experiments with recreating such structures, for example at Stonehenge, have shown that this is theoretically possible with the involvement of hundreds or even thousands of people. As for the purpose, opinions agree on several key functions. Ritual centers for performing rites related to fertility, seasons, death, and ancestors. Funerary monuments for prominent individuals or entire communities. Astronomical observatories for tracking the movement of celestial bodies, which was critical for agriculture, determining the timing of sowing and harvesting. And territorial markers or symbols of power that reinforce the group's unity and defined its borders. Social shifts, such as the transition from nomadic to sedentary agriculture, the emergence of the first chiefdoms in population growth, may have contributed to the development of such large-scale projects that require centralized organization and collective labor. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses offer much more speculative explanations that go beyond the purely scientific approach. Some proponents of these theories suggest the use of unknown lost technologies or even anti-gravity devices that may have been available to the ancients. These ideas are often associated with ideas about highly developed civilizations that existed in prehistoric times and possessed knowledge that surpassed our modern ones. Other versions include extraterrestrial influence, suggesting that the megaliths were built or their construction was directed by extraterrestrial beings who passed on their knowledge to the ancient people or even helped them physically. This hypothesis is often supported by the accuracy of the astronomical orientation of some megaliths, which seems too complex for primitive societies. There is also speculation about the sacred or energetic significance of these places, where the stones were placed in such a way as to accumulate or channel earth energies or cosmic energies used for healing, rituals, or communication with other dimensions. The idea of deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that knowledge about the construction of megaliths was lost as a result of disasters, for example, the biblical flood, or purposefully hidden by priests, is also popular in these circles. Such legends often point to the sudden cessation of megalithic construction, which may have been due to climate change, the disappearance of cultural traditions, or simply a shift to new forms of expression. Legends, and myths around megaliths are incredibly rich and diverse, filling in the white spots of history. In Britain, Stonehenge is associated with the wizard Merlin and King Arthur, who, according to legend, transferred stones from Ireland with the help of magic. In Scandinavia and Northern Europe, dolmens are often associated with dwarves, trolls, or other mythical creatures that were believed to have the power to move stones. In many cultures, these stones are considered places of power, associated with ancestral spirits or deities with special energy. Stories about the giants who built these structures, or about the supernatural forces that helped in their construction, are widespread. These myths not only explain the inexplicable to ancient and medieval people, but also emphasize the deep reverence and awe that these structures evoked among those who lived near them. These traditions are part of the collective memory of something great and mysterious that was created in the distant past, but whose true purpose or history has been lost. The mystery of megaliths makes us think about the limits of human capabilities in ancient times, and how much knowledge about the past we still have not solved. Were these simply incredible feats of engineering, or did they hide much deeper, now lost knowledge about the world and space? Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, the forgotten cities of the Indus Valley. Imagine a vast civilization comparable in scale to ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, but completely unknown to the rest of the world for thousands of years. A civilization that built grandiose cities, had a developed control system, sophisticated technologies, and a seemingly peaceful way of life, but suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only ruins and unencrypted writing. We are talking about the Indian civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, which flourished in the period from 2500 to 1900 BC in the territory of modern Pakistan in northwestern India. Until its discovery in the 1920s, world history considered Mesopotamia and Egypt as the only cradles of civilization, completely ignoring the existence of such a developed culture on the Indian subcontinent. It was a state of deep historical oblivion when an entire chapter of human history was erased from the collective memory. Key features of cities of the Indian civilization, such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, are striking for their thoughtfulness and advanced engineering solutions. These cities were built according to a strict geometric plan using standardized bricks, which indicates centralized planning and efficient management. Each street was perfectly straight, and they all intersected at right angles, creating a clear grid. Special attention was paid to sanitation and water supply. In Mohenjo-Daro, a complex sewer and water supply system was discovered with covered drains, public toilets, and even private bathrooms in houses, which is unprecedented for that time and surpasses many cities in medieval Europe. Famous Big Bathhouse in Mohenjo-Daro, a 12 or 7 meter wide, 2.4 meter deep structure with bitumen waterproofing, was supposedly used for ritual ablutions, emphasizing the sacred significance of cleanliness. The Indus civilization had its own writing system, known as the Indus script, found on thousands of seals, ceramics, and tablets. These seals, carved from steatite, with images of animals, for example, unicorns, bulls, elephants, and mysterious symbols, were probably used for commercial or administrative purposes, and also had sacred significance. They show evidence of a developed trade network that extended to Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. However, unlike the Egyptian hieroglyphs or cuneiform script, the Indic script has not yet been deciphered, which is one of the greatest linguistic mysteries and the main reason for the unknown of many aspects of their culture. The absence of monumental tombs or huge temples like those of Egypt, as well as clear evidence of large-scale wars or monarchical rule, distinguishes Indian civilization from its contemporaries and points to perhaps more egalitarian or priestly governance. Their art represented by small sculptures, for example, the famous dancer from Mohenjo-Daro, it is distinguished by its elegance and unique style. The discovery of these cities completely changed our understanding of the development of urban life and the complexity of ancient societies, adding to the list of great civilizations that the world did not even know existed. Whispers of the Great Oblivion, the mystery of the disappearance of the Indian civilization. The main mystery that shrouds the Indian civilization is its mysterious and relatively rapid decline and subsequent disappearance around 1900–1800 BC. Over the course of several centuries, this flourishing and highly organized culture, covering an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, gradually declined, and then its cities were abandoned. The lack of clear, unambiguous causes or direct evidence of mass destruction, as well as the unencrypted writing, make this collapse one of the most intriguing mysteries of archaeology. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the causes of the death of the Indian civilization are mainly reduced to a complex of environmental and climatic factors. One of the leading theories is the change in the course of the Indus River. This powerful river, which was the artery of civilization, providing water for agriculture and transport routes, could change its course as a result of tectonic shifts or large-scale floods. This would dry up some regions and flood others, making farming impossible and forcing the population to migrate. Another key factor is climate change, particularly a prolonged period of drought that could lead to desertification and reduced yields. Evidence of reduced precipitation and changes in monsoon patterns during this period supports this hypothesis. Environmental changes caused by over-exploitation of the environment, for example, deforestation to produce timber for construction and firing bricks, which led to soil erosion, may also have contributed to the decline. Destruction of infrastructure, such as irrigation systems, due to changes in water levels or flooding, could also undermine the economic basis of cities. There was also the popular but now largely refuted Aryan invasion theory, which suggested that the Indian civilization was destroyed as a result of the invasion of Indo-Aryan tribes. However, archaeological evidence does not support widespread destruction of cities or evidence of organized invasion. Most likely, the decline was gradual, caused by a complex combination of factors that undermine the viability of cities and forced the population to leave them, migrating to less affected regions. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses often attempt to explain the suddenness and mystery of the disappearance of the Indian civilization, especially given the absence of obvious signs of violence or catastrophes. Some proponents of such theories suggest that civilization could have been destroyed by a catastrophic event of cosmic origin, such as a meteorite fall, although there is no direct evidence of this. Other versions attribute the decline to divine intervention or karmic retribution for certain sins or mistakes that were committed by the population, which led to the loss of favor of the higher powers. This idea is often found in the legends about the death of ancient civilizations. There are also suggestions of deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that the inhabitants of the Indian civilization possessed some sacred or technological secrets that they decided to take with them when they left the cities. This could be due to a change in religious beliefs or a desire to preserve the purity of their practices. Some researchers, inspired by the uniqueness of the Indic script and the lack of centralized power, suggest that this civilization may have had a special, more spiritual or peaceful form of existence that does not fit into the usual models of empires, which made it vulnerable to external or internal changes that are not related to war. Theories of extraterrestrial influence or interference that either contributed to the boom or caused the decline also pop up from time to time, especially in the context of unencrypted writing, which some consider unearthly. Traditions, legends, and myths in the context of the Indian civilization are extremely complex due to the unencrypted writing. However, some ancient Indian texts, such as the Rig Veda, describe a flood that may have been an echo of large-scale floods caused by changing riverbeds. These texts also mention various cataclysms and the departure of ancient peoples. These traditions, written down many centuries after the decline of the Harappan civilization, may contain distorted memories of the events leading up to its end. The myth of the Saraswati, a river that dried up, can also be an allegorical reflection of the decline associated with a change in the hydrological regime. Thus, these myths and legends, although they do not provide direct answers, create an atmosphere of mystery and are a cultural echo of large-scale natural changes that could be one of the main reasons for the disappearance of this once great civilization. The mystery of the disappearance of Indian civilization remains a vivid reminder of the fragility of human achievement in the face of natural forces and how much remains to be learned about humanity's deep past. Will the decoding of the Indus script ever reveal the true cause of this great oblivion? Ancient cave paintings, windows to primal consciousness. Imagine that for tens of thousands of years, long before the advent of cities, writing, and even agriculture, our ancestors left stunning works of art on cave walls and rocks around the world. These were not just random scratches, but highly artistic images of animals, hunting scenes, human figures, and mysterious symbols, made with amazing accuracy and expressiveness. Ancient rock carvings and petroglyphs represent the earliest and one of the longest-lasting manifestations of human creativity, the heyday of which covers the period from the Upper Paleolithic, approximately 40,000 years ago, to historical time. Prior to their systematic study, many of them were unknown to the general public or misinterpreted as primitive scribbles, reflecting a deep misunderstanding of the complexity of primitive thinking. Now they are invaluable windows into the consciousness of our ancient ancestors, their beliefs, lifestyle, and perception of the world. The key features of these ancient galleries are striking and challenge stereotypes about the primitiveness of primitive man. Take, for example, the Lascaux caves in France or Altamira in Spain, where thousands of images of bison, deer, horses, and mammoths have been found, executed with incredible vividness and anatomical accuracy. The artists used natural pigments ochre, charcoal, manganese, and applied them with primitive tools, but with amazing skill, creating a three-dimensional effect by using the natural curves of the rocks. Rock paintings in Kakadu, Australia, or Drakensberg, South Africa, made by Aborigines and Bushmen, show not only animals, but also human figures in motion, scenes of dances, rituals, as well as images of spirits and mythical creatures, which indicates the deep sacred significance of art. Some drawings, such as the one in the Chauvet cave in France, date back more than 30,000 years and show the dynamics of animal movement, which indicates the highest level of observation and artistic talent. The uniqueness of these images lies not only in their beauty, but also in their location. Many of them are located in hard-to-reach, deep parts of caves where daylight does not penetrate. This means using artificial lighting, oil lamps, and probably performing secret rituals or ceremonies that are accessible only to a select few. The absence of domestic scenes or everyday life, the dominance of images of animals, especially large and dangerous ones, suggests the magical or totemic significance of these drawings. Perhaps they were designed to ensure successful hunting, appease the spirits of animals, or convey knowledge about them. Some scientists suggest that the drawings may have been part of shamanic practices, where the image of an animal helped to reach a trance state or establish a connection with the spirit world. Moreover, the presence of abstract symbols, dots, lines, geometric shapes, next to animals indicates a complex system of symbolic thinking, which may have been an early form of communication or even proto-writing. These drawings are not just pictures. They are evidence of advanced intelligence, spirituality, mythology, and social interaction among our ancient ancestors, completely rewriting the ideas about the origin of art and thinking. Secret meanings and forgotten rituals, the riddle of primitive art. The main mystery surrounding ancient cave paintings is the lack of an unambiguous and complete understanding of their true purpose and meaning for those who created them. Despite their abundance and excellent execution, we lack direct evidence, for example, written sources, about their goals, which gives rise to many interpretations and hypotheses. What exactly made primitive people spend so much effort creating art in the depths of caves where light barely penetrated? What was their symbolic language? The traditional or rational hypotheses offer several basic explanations. The most common is hunting magic. It is believed that animal drawings were part of rituals designed to ensure a successful hunt. The image of a wounded animal or an animal trapped in a trap could be an attempt to magically influence reality, ensure the abundance of prey and success in survival. Another hypothesis is initiation rituals. Caves may have been places of transition for young hunters, where they were taught about the world, animals, and social roles. The drawings would serve as a visual aid or part of a mystical experience. The third hypothesis is information exchange. Drawings could be a way of transmitting knowledge about animal behavior, seasonal migrations, dangerous predators, or even routes. This would be a form of visual library for pre-written societies. Territorial markers or symbols of tribal identity could also play a role. Natural disasters, climate change, or migration may have contributed to changing and ending these traditions. However, these hypotheses do not fully explain the complexity and variety of images, especially the presence of abstract symbols or scenes that are not directly related to hunting. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses go deeper into more speculative aspects. One of the most popular theories is the shamanic hypothesis. The cave paintings could be a reflection of the trance states of shamans who, under the influence of psychoactive substances or extreme conditions, sensory deprivation in the dark of a cave, saw animals or spirits and then depicted them. Symbols, such as dots or lines, could represent entoptic phenomena-visual distortions that occur in altered states of consciousness. This suggests a deep connection between art and spiritual practices and altered states. Some proponents of extraterrestrial influence, or ancient astronauts, they point out the presence of some mysterious figures that they believe resemble astronauts or alien creatures, suggesting that they may have been a source of inspiration for primitive artists or even teachers who passed on knowledge to them. This adds a mystical element, implying that the art may have had unearthly roots. There are also suggestions of deliberate concealment of knowledge, that these drawings contain encrypted messages or deep philosophical truths that were understood only by a narrow circle of initiates and were eventually lost or deliberately hidden. This could be due to a change in religious dogmas or the disappearance of shamanic traditions. Such ideas are often intertwined with the concept of the collective unconscious, where universal archetypes and symbols are manifested in the art of different cultures, regardless of their geographical separation. Traditions, legends, and myths about art and its origins among modern primitive peoples, such as the Australian Aborigines or the African Bushmen, provide valuable analogies and insights. These cultures still practice rock art, and their explanations often link the drawings to the dream world, totemic animals, ancestral spirits, and creation myths. For example, for Aborigines, drawings are part of the dream time, a mythological past that is constantly present in the present. Drawings serve as a way to connect with this time, maintain balance in nature, and convey knowledge about the landscape, animals, and rituals. Legends about cultural heroes or first ancestors who taught people art and wisdom can also be echoes of forgotten times, when art played a central role in spiritual and social life. These traditions emphasize the deep sacred nature of primitive art, which was not just an ornament, but a living element of the world, filled with power and meaning. The mystery of rock art continues to inspire and puzzle, making us think about the earliest manifestations of the human mind and how deeply art is ingrained in our nature. What are these ancient images trying to tell us? And will future discoveries reveal their full meaning? The tomb of Tutankhamun, the return of the golden pharaoh, and the curse of the millennia. Imagine a world obsessed with the mysteries of ancient Egypt, yet devoid of most of the real keys to understanding it. For centuries, archaeologists have unearthed the looted tombs of pharaohs, found majestic but empty sarcophagi, and fragments of mummies, which created a sense of inescapable loss. It was believed that all the great treasures and untouched burials had long been found and looted by ancient looters. Thus, deep oblivion shrouded not only the names and deeds of many rulers, but also the material embodiment of their faith in the afterlife. In this context, Pharaoh Tutankhamun was only a vague figure from a dynasty that seemed relatively insignificant, and his reign, which lasted only about 10 years, approximately 1332-1323 BC, was so short that his name was hardly mentioned in official annals. His previous fame was minimal, and his name was almost erased from history by subsequent rulers who sought to destroy the memory of the heretical Amarna period. That is why the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, KV62, in the Valley of the Kings in 1922 by Howard Carter, was not just an archaeological discovery, but a cultural phenomenon that forever rewritten the history of Egyptology and changed the public perception of ancient Egypt. It was the first and still the only virtually intact tomb of a pharaoh discovered in the Valley of the Kings, its heyday. As an archaeological site began when Carter, sponsored by Lord Carnarvon, made an inscription on the doors. "Do you see anything?" and heard the legendary answer, "Yes, wonderful things." The key features of this tomb and its contents stunned the world. Unlike the monumental but looted tombs of more powerful pharaohs, Tutankhamun's tomb was relatively small, but filled to capacity with incredible treasures. More than 5,000 artifacts, each of which was a masterpiece of ancient Egyptian art and craft. Among them were the famous golden burial mask of the pharaoh, weighing more than 10 kilos of pure gold, inlaid with semi-precious stones, which is one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. 4 gilded sarcophagi stood one inside another, the last of which was made of pure gold. Numerous sacred amulets, jewelry, figurines of gods and the king, decorated with gold, lapis lazuli and carnelian, designed to ensure the pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife. But in addition to jewelry, the tomb contained priceless household items, personal belongings of the pharaoh, weapons, furniture, chariots, clothing, musical instruments, and even food and wine supplies. These items allowed scientists to take a peek into the daily life and royal rituals of New Kingdom Egypt, providing a unique snapshot. Cultures of that time. Of particular importance were numerous religious texts and amulets that reveal the subtleties of Egyptian beliefs in the afterlife, mummification rituals, and worship of the gods. The sacred significance of the tomb was that it was not just a burial place, but a complex designed to ensure the eternal life of the pharaoh in the afterlife. Each object, each painting on the walls had its own purpose, its own symbolism, reflecting the deep religious and cosmological ideas of the Egyptians. The discovery of this tomb not only gave an unprecedented insight into the greatness and wealth of the pharaohs, but also allowed us to restore the lost details of the life and beliefs of one of the most mysterious periods in the history of Egypt. It was not just the discovery, but the resurrection of an entire era that had been almost completely erased from historical memory. The curse of the pharaohs and the secrets of the vanished young king. The main mystery surrounding the tomb of Tutankhamun lies not only in the reasons for his early death, but also in the mysterious curse of the pharaohs, which, it was claimed, fell on those who dared to disturb the rest of the ancient king. The lack of clear, unambiguous medical or logical explanations for the series of strange deaths that followed the discovery only increased the mystical aura around the tomb, giving rise to endless speculation and legends. In addition, the very identity of Tutankhamun remained a mystery. Why did such a young ruler die so early, and why was his name erased from history? Traditional or rational hypotheses about the curse or tuition are reduced to natural causes. The most logical one is the influence of mold, bacteria, and ancient viruses that could have been in the closed tomb for thousands of years. Inhaling spores or pathogens that modern humans are not immune to could lead to various diseases, especially in people with weakened health, such as Lord Carnarvon, who died of blood poisoning after being bitten by a mosquito. Toxic gases produced by the decomposition of organic materials or minerals could also accumulate in the confined space of the tomb. In addition, the psychosomatic effect may have played a role. Belief in the curse may have caused some people stress and anxiety, which worsened existing health problems. Many of those who worked on the dig were elderly or had chronic illnesses, which made them more vulnerable. In fact, most of the people who participated in the Carter expedition lived long lives, and the number of deaths attributed to the curse was statistically no higher than normal. As for Tutankhamun himself, analysis of his mummy and modern scientific research, including DNA analysis, have provided important medical hypotheses about the causes of his death. For a long time, it was assumed that he was killed, for example, a blow to the head, but the CT scan showed that the head injury was post-mortem. Recent research suggests a combination of factors. Tutankhamun suffered from a variety of birth defects and genetic diseases, including clubfoot and spinal deformity, probably due to incest in his royal family. He was the son of Akhenaten and his own sister. A DNA test showed that he had malaria, which combined with a broken leg, probably sustained shortly before his death, and a weakened immune system could have been fatal. So his death was most likely the result of a complex interplay of genetic problems, injuries, and infections, rather than violence. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses about the curse and death of Tutankhamun flourished in the press and popular culture. This includes ideas about ancient magic that was specifically activated to protect the tomb from desecration. Some believe that the ancient priests had the ability to charge objects or places with negative energy, which manifested itself in the form of diseases and misfortunes for troublemakers. There are versions about the guardian spirits of the tomb who avenged the invasion, or that the spirit of Tutankhamun himself did not find rest and pursued those who disturbed his eternal sleep. In the context of karmic retribution or divine intervention, the death of researchers was considered as a punishment for blasphemy and violation of the sacred rite. Extraterrestrial influence or hidden conspiracies are not so strongly associated with the tomb itself, but the concept of a curse as a deliberate concealment or protection of knowledge fits well into this context. Some paranormal versions suggested that the tomb was a kind of portal, releasing certain entities or energies. Legends, and myths about the curses of the tombs of the pharaohs existed long before the discovery of Tutankhamun and were distributed among local residents. Stories of tomb guards and the misfortunes that befell robbers were passed down from generation to generation. After the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb, these ancient beliefs received a new and powerful reinforcement in the eyes of the public. Journalists actively picked up and promoted the idea of a curse, linking every death or misfortune with the intervention of otherworldly forces, which led to mass hysteria and popularization of Egyptian myths about death and the afterlife. Many films, books, and works of art were inspired by this story, cementing the image of Tutankhamun as the Golden Pharaoh, surrounded not only by treasures, but also by an ominous aura. This curse myth has become an integral part of the cultural narrative of archaeological discoveries, emphasizing respect for ancient shrines and a reminder that not all the secrets of the past need to be solved. Thus, the tomb of Tutankhamun became not only a triumph of archaeology, but also a powerful symbol of the interaction of science and mysticism, rational explanation, and deep-rooted beliefs. She showed how archaeological finds can not only rewrite history, but also shape our cultural consciousness, creating new legends from ancient secrets. Terracotta Army, the first emperor's silent guards. Imagine not just an army, but a whole world made of clay, with all its details: soldiers, horses, chariots, generals, and archers, each of which has unique facial features, hairstyles, and uniforms. This underground legion, created to serve the emperor in the afterlife, has been buried and forgotten for more than 2 millennia, hidden under the earth in Shanxi Province, China. Until its accidental discovery in 1974 by local farmers digging a well, the existence of such a grandiose army was unknown to anyone, except perhaps a small circle of ancient chroniclers. The story of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, reigned 221–210 BC, although known from written sources, could not fully convey the extent of his power and obsession with eternal life. Thus, the Terracotta Army was in a state of complete historical oblivion, its greatness was hidden from the eyes of posterity, and the current state of uncertainty, or rather misunderstanding, was that only a small part of this gigantic complex was excavated, leaving many questions about its true size and contents. The heyday of this archaeological site began at the time of its first discovery. This is not just a collection of statues, but a unique testament to the engineering, artistic, and organizational genius of ancient China, which stunned scientists and the public with the scale of its design and execution. The army consists of more than 8,000 terracotta warriors, 130 chariots drawn by 520 horses, and 150 cavalry horses. All of them were arranged in a battle formation facing east, ready to defend the emperor from any threats from the afterlife, indicating the colossal resources and manpower that had been involved in the construction over the decades. Each statue, despite mass production, has a striking personality and detail. Unique facial features, hairstyles, expressions, which makes them look like real people. The various ranks and types of troops, infantrymen, archers, charioteers, and generals are represented in the appropriate uniforms and weapons, giving an invaluable insight into the military organization, armament, and tactics of the Qin army of that era. Initially, all the statues were brightly painted using mineral pigments, adding even more realism and grandeur, although most of this paint eventually peeled off after contact with air. The creation of these thousands of statues required complex technology and labor organization. First, the main body parts were formed from clay using standard modules. Then they were fired at high temperatures in huge furnaces, after which they were assembled and painted. This standardization and mass production, achieved more than 2,000 years ago, is an impressive example of early industrialization and demonstrates an incredible level of planning. The sacred significance of the terracotta army was deeply rooted in Qin Shi Huang's belief in the afterlife. The army was part of the grand mausoleum of the emperor, which according to the historical records of Sima Qian, Shiji, historical notes, it was built as an underground kingdom, reflecting in detail its earthly empire. The purpose of this colossal army was to protect the emperor in the afterlife and ensure his eternal rule and power, continuing to control the empire even after death. This reflects the deep beliefs of the ancient Chinese in the afterlife, the cult of ancestors, and the emperor as a son of heaven whose power extends beyond physical existence. Legends say that the mausoleum itself is a miniature landscape of the whole of China, with mercury rivers imitating the country's great rivers and sky arches studded with precious stones, symbolizing stars and constellations. And its construction took decades and required the participation of hundreds of thousands of workers. The discovery of this army allowed us not only to confirm many of these ancient texts, which were previously considered exaggerations, but also to feel the unprecedented scale of the ambitions and beliefs of the first emperor. The creation of such a project required an unprecedented centralization of power, efficient organization of labor, and control over vast resources, which indicates that the Qin Empire, despite its short-lived nature, was capable of mobilizing millions of people to achieve its grandiose, almost unimaginable goals. The discovery of the Terracotta Army didn't just add a new page to China's history, it rewrote our understanding of the scale and complexity of ancient empires, showing that the ambitions and beliefs of ancient rulers could go far beyond the ordinary human imagination, making the afterlife as complex and manageable as the earthly realm. The Curse of Mercury Rivers and the Unknown Heart of the Mausoleum, Secrets of Qin Shi Huang. The main mystery that still surrounds the Terracotta Army is the inability to fully explore the main burial site of the Qin Shi Huang Emperor himself, as well as the mysteries surrounding his death and legacy. The Emperor's mausoleum, located under a huge mound, has yet to be excavated, partly because of concerns about damaging priceless artifacts, and partly because of ancient warnings about traps and toxic substances described in historical texts. The lack of direct access to the central tomb gives rise to a lot of speculation and unsolved questions. The traditional or rational hypotheses about Qin Shi Huang's death and the reasons why his tomb was not excavated are based on historical records and scientific data. According to the Annals of Sima Qian, Shiji, historical notes, the emperor, obsessed with the search for immortality, took elixirs of life, which as is now known contained mercury. It was probably mercury poisoning that caused his early death at the age of 49, and not any conspiracy or murder. Mercury was used in Chinese alchemy to make elixirs that were considered to grant eternal life, which ironically led to the opposite effect. As for the tomb, Sima Qian also describes rivers of mercury that mimic the rivers and oceans of China inside the mausoleum, as well as automatic crossbows and other deadly traps designed to protect the tomb from looters. Modern geochemical studies have indeed found an abnormally high concentration of mercury in the soil above the mausoleum, which confirms the words of the ancient historian and serves as a strong argument against an early excavation. Concerns are also raised about the condition of the artifacts. Terracotta figures, after contact with air, quickly lose their original bright colors, which requires the development of new conservation methods before mass excavations. Thus, the rational reasons for non-disclosure are related to the need for preservation and safety, and not to inability. The unconventional or mystical hypotheses surrounding the mausoleum and the emperor's death are much more numerous and fascinating. The idea of the emperor's curse, or revenge of those millions of people who died during the construction of grandiose structures, the Great Wall, canals, the mausoleum itself, is a popular version. Some believe that the souls of these workers, buried alive or killed by overwork, still guard the emperor's rest, bringing misfortune to those who dare to disturb him. Mercury rivers in this context are perceived not just as protection, but as a magical barrier that keeps evil spirits away and prevents the emperor from rebelling if his peace is disturbed, or conversely, does not allow the spirits of the world of the living to enter his afterlife. There are also speculations about the hidden knowledge or technology that Qin Shi Huang possessed, which may have been hidden in his tomb. Legends speak of secret passages, hidden rooms, and even the incredible mechanisms that still function. Some attribute the emperor's ambition to attain immortality to the search for alchemical elixirs, which could be not just mercury mixtures, but contain some supernatural or even extraterrestrial components passed on to him by ancient beings. The idea of karmic retribution is also present. The emperor who united China at the cost of millions of lives in brutal repression may have been doomed to eternal loneliness and imprisonment in his own tomb, and Mercury not only killed him, but also became part of his afterlife punishment. It is also hypothesized that the terracotta army itself, having individual features, is not just sculptures, but living creatures designed to come to life in the event of a threat, which gives them an almost magical nature. Legends, and myths about the Emperor Qin Shi Huang and his mausoleum permeate the entire Chinese culture. Tales of his tyranny, quest for immortality, and grandiose projects were passed down from generation to generation. A special place is occupied by the legends about the lost dynasty and that the emperor tried to create something that went beyond human understanding. Many locals still believe in the guardian spirits of the mausoleum and are in awe of it. Stories of tomb builders being buried alive along with their treasures to preserve the mystery of the location of the traps are also widespread and add to the gloom of the place. These traditions, often transmitted orally, shape the cultural landscape around the mausoleum, infusing it with an atmosphere of mystery, grandeur, and danger, emphasizing that some secrets of the past must remain intact. Thus, the Terracotta Army and the undiscovered Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum remain one of the most stunning archaeological discoveries that continues to challenge science and fuel the imagination. Will humanity ever be able to safely enter the heart of this subterranean realm and uncover its final secrets? Or will the wisdom of the ancient Chinese who predicted the danger prove stronger than our curiosity? Jomon Cemetery, Neolithic sea hunters, and the Lost Garden of Eden of Japan. Imagine a civilization that existed long before the advent of rice, iron, and the first empires, but which nevertheless had an amazing sedentariness, a complex social structure, sophisticated art, and, most strikingly, a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, while still creating permanent settlements and pottery. This is the Jomon culture, which literally means rope pattern, from the characteristic ornaments on ceramics, which flourished on the Japanese islands for an incredibly long period, from 10,000 to 300 BC. For decades, academic thought on prehistoric human development has suggested that sedentary lifestyles and pottery production were inextricably linked to agriculture. The discovery and deep study of the Jomon culture completely rewrote this paradigm, showing that highly developed, sedentary societies could exist and thrive on the abundance of natural resources, especially marine ones. Until recently, Jomon was often underestimated in the context of world civilizations, being in a kind of oblivion compared to Mesopotamia or Egypt. Its unique position as a Neolithic civilization without agriculture remained little known to the general public. The current state of our understanding of the Jomon culture is still evolving, and each new discovery adds new layers to this amazing story, making it even more mysterious and intriguing. The heyday of the Zamanic culture, in particular its Middle Zamanic period, approximately 2500 and 1500 BCE, was truly unique. The key features of this civilization are striking in their originality and surprise. First of all, it is the earliest known pottery-producing culture in the world, and its appearance dates back more than 16,000 years ago, long before the appearance of ceramics in other regions. Zamoński ceramics are distinguished by an incredible variety of shapes, sizes, and intricate patterns, some of which are so intricate that they resemble flames or even futuristic objects, which indicates high artistic skill and developed aesthetics. The size of some vessels reached significant sizes, which required complex firing technologies. Second, unlike the generally accepted ideas about hunter-gatherers, the Zamons were sedentary or semi-nomadic, building large permanent settlements with semi-dugouts located around central squares, which is reminiscent of early farming villages. The discovery of extensive kitchen waste, consisting mainly of shells, fish bones, marine mammals, such as seals and whales, as well as the remains of wild plants, indicates an extremely rich and diverse diet based on the intensive use of natural resources. This was possible due to Japan's unique geographical location, rich in both marine fauna and forest resources, including nuts, chestnuts, acorns, wild fruits and vegetables that were actively harvested and even possibly managed or partially cultivated, although there was no full-fledged agriculture. Another striking feature is the development of symbolic thinking and ritual practices. The findings of numerous clay dog figurines, many of which have exaggerated eyes resembling safety glasses and feminine features, probably served for religious or magical purposes, possibly as symbols of fertility, protection, or amulets. The discovery of ritual stone rings located around settlements, as well as elaborate burials, sometimes with funerary offerings, indicates a developed belief in the afterlife and ancestral cult. Primitive stone tools for processing wood, bones, and horns were also found, as well as fishing hooks, harpoons, and other items that indicate their highly developed skills in sea hunting and fishing. The sacred significance of the Zem culture stems from its deep connection with nature and animistic beliefs, where every element of the environment was perceived as animate. This culture, which has flourished for 10,000 years, is a unique example of sustainable development without the transition to full-scale agriculture, challenging our ideas about the progress and development of civilization. It was, in fact, a kind of lost Eden where the abundance of nature allowed for the creation of a complex society without the grueling agricultural labor. Whispers of Stone Age ancestors. The mystery of the decline and legacy of the Jomon. The main mystery surrounding the Jomon culture is its gradual but inexplicable decline and transformation at the end of its long history, around 1000 to 300 BCE, when it was replaced by the Yayoi culture, which brought with it rice farming and metallurgy. This was not a sudden disappearance, as is the case with some other civilizations, but it still raises questions. Why did such a stable and successful culture, which flourished for 10,000 years, eventually give up before the new trends? And why was its unique way of life not fully preserved? The lack of clear, unambiguous reasons for such a cultural shift and the lack of our own written language leave many gaps in our understanding. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the transition from Jomon to Yayoi are mainly focused on population migration and the impact of new technologies and ideas. It is believed that migrants from mainland Asia, presumably from the Korean Peninsula or northern China, who had skills in rice farming and metallurgy, bronze and iron, began to arrive on the Japanese islands. These new technologies offered significant advantages. Rice farming allowed for the production of surplus food, supporting a much larger population, and metallurgy provided more efficient tools and weapons. As a result, hunting and gathering-based Zem communities have faced pressure from more productive and fast-growing Yayoi groups. This did not necessarily mean war or extermination. Rather, it was a process of gradual assimilation where the Zemans adopted new technologies and lifestyles, integrating into the more dynamic Yayoi culture. Climate changes, such as cold weather or increased rainfall, which may have affected the availability of natural resources, may also have pushed the Zemans to adopt agriculture. Economic changes, such as the depletion of local resources or changing trade routes, may also have played a role in the gradual weakening of the traditional Jomon way of life. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses attempt to explain this transition beyond purely materialistic reasons. Some proponents of such theories suggest that the decline of the Zemans may have been due to spiritual exhaustion or a change in their sacred beliefs. Perhaps the abundance of nature that had long supported their way of life began to be taken for granted, leading to a loss of spiritual connection with the environment and a weakening of their traditions. This could make them vulnerable to new, more energetic cultures. There are also suggestions of a deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that the Demonians possessed unique, now-lost knowledge of harmonious coexistence with nature, which they were unable to transmit or which was lost in the course of cultural assimilation. Some researchers speculate that their art and ceramics may have contained cosmic messages or been part of ancient, now-forgotten technologies related to Earth's energy or even extraterrestrial influences that either left them or ceased to be active. The idea of karmic retribution less applicable to such a seemingly peaceful culture, but one can assume that their Eden existence was fragile and not meant to last forever as it was. Some see it as part of a larger cycle, where one form of civilization naturally replaces another, perhaps guided by some higher forces or universal laws of development. Traditions, legends, and myths play a key role in shaping the modern understanding of Zem culture, especially given the lack of written sources. Although there are no direct chronicles of Jomon, many elements of Japanese mythology and Shinto beliefs, especially those related to nature, kami spirits, deities, and ancestral worship, may have deep roots in Jomon traditions. Myths about the origin of the Japanese people, the arrival of the gods, and the early emperors, although they belong to the later Yayoi and Kofun period, may have absorbed echoes of the ancient beliefs of the Zemans. Legends about the richness of forests and seas, about harmonious coexistence with nature, about spiritual connection with the earth. All this can be an echo of the Zemansky way of life. The dog figurines, which are now important archaeological finds, may have been part of forgotten rituals and beliefs. Their meaning is now lost, but their shape continues to whisper about ancient deities or protective spirits. These traditions, even if they are not direct evidence, help us to look into the mentality and spiritual world of the people who lived in Japan thousands of years ago, and understand that the transition from Jomon to Yayoi was not just a technological leap, but also a profound cultural and spiritual transformation. Thus, the Jomon culture is not just a collection of archaeological finds. It is living evidence of the remarkable resilience and complexity of pre-agricultural societies, and its decline and transformation raises fundamental questions about the nature of civilizational development and how humanity adapts to changing conditions, sometimes sacrificing ancient traditions for new technologies. Cahokia, the forgotten metropolis of North America and the mystery of the mounds. Imagine a grandiose city in the heart of North America, whose population in its heyday surpassed that of London at that time, and its monumental earthen mounds towered over the landscape like the pyramids of Egypt. This city, known as Cahokia, was located in what is now Illinois, near St. Louis, and was the largest settlement north of Mexico in the pre-Columbian era. Its heyday occurred between 1050 and 1200 AD, when it was the center of a thriving Mississippian culture. Until recently, especially in European historiography, there was often a perception that the indigenous peoples of North America lived mainly in small, nomadic tribes, and large-scale urban civilizations were characteristic only of Mesoamerica, Maya, Aztecs. The discovery and study of Cahokia completely rewrote this Eurocentric view, providing the world with evidence of a complex hierarchical society with a developed social structure, centralized power, astronomical knowledge, and monumental construction in the United States. Until the mid-20th century, Cahokia was known only to a few specialists, and its greatness was almost completely forgotten by the general public, buried under agricultural fields and modern settlements. The current state of our awareness of Cahokia is constantly growing, but many of its mysteries are still waiting to be solved, making it one of the most mysterious and intriguing archaeological sites in North America. The key features of Cahokia, which attest to its greatness and complexity, are amazing. First of all, these are grandiose earthen mounds, of which there were more than 120, although only about 80 have survived to this day. The most prominent of these Menachov Kurgan, Monk's Mound, is the largest pre-Columbian earthen structure in North America, with a base larger than the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza and a height of 30 meters. At the top of this mound, it is assumed that there was a temple or residence of the main leader or priest, which symbolized his power and connection with heaven. The construction of such monumental structures required an incredible organization of labor, the mobilization of thousands of people, and centralized management. Cahokia's urban layout also indicates a high degree of organization. The city was oriented to the cardinal directions, with extensive squares, ritual areas, and residential neighborhoods. Archaeological research has revealed the presence of complex residential structures, including large buildings for the elite and more modest dwellings for ordinary citizens, which indicates a pronounced social stratification. The discovery of Woodhenge, circles made of wooden pillars that are precisely aligned with the sunrises on the solstices and equinoxes, demonstrates deep astronomical knowledge. Inhabitants of Cahokia. These structures were probably used as calendars to determine agricultural cycles and important ceremonies, emphasizing the sacred significance of astronomy in their culture. The Indus civilization had its own writing system, known as the Indus script, found on thousands of seals, ceramics, and tablets. These seals, carved from steatite with images of animals, for example, unicorns, bulls, elephants, and mysterious symbols, were probably used for commercial or administrative purposes and also had sacred significance. They show evidence of a developed trade network that extended to Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. However, unlike the Egyptian hieroglyphs or cuneiform script, the Indic script has not yet been deciphered, which is one of the greatest linguistic mysteries and the main reason for the unknown of many aspects of their culture. The absence of monumental tombs or huge temples like those of Egypt, as well as clear evidence of large-scale wars or monarchical rule, distinguishes Indian civilization from its contemporaries and points to perhaps more egalitarian or priestly governance. Their art, represented by small sculptures, for example, the famous dancer from Mohenjo-Daro, it is distinguished by its elegance and unique style. The discovery of these cities completely changed our understanding of the development of urban life and the complexity of ancient societies, adding to the list of great civilizations that the world did not even know existed. Cahokia's sacred significance stemmed from its central role as a religious and political hub. The mounds served not only as bases for temples and elite dwellings, but were also burial sites, especially Mound 72, where the remains of a noble were found buried on a bed of beads, surrounded by hundreds of human sacrifices, including young women and men without heads. These findings provide evidence of violent rituals and a strong social hierarchy, where the power of rulers was probably based on religious authority. Cahokia's economy flourished thanks to the fertile land of the river valleys and an extensive trade network that stretched for thousands of kilometers, supplying the city with exotic materials such as copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the West. This demonstrates the complex system of exchange and contact between the various cultures of North America. Thus, Cahokia was not just a city, it was a complex civilization, capable of large-scale construction, social stratification, and long-distance trade connections, which completely rewrites the idea of pre-Columbian North America. Silence after greatness. The mystery of Cahokia's decline in the vanished Mound Empire. The main mystery that shrouds Cahokia lies in its relatively sudden and inexplicable decline and subsequent desolation around 1350 AD, less than 3 centuries after its heyday. The city that once boomed with life has been reduced to abandoned ruins, and its inhabitants have dispersed or disappeared. The lack of clear, unambiguous causes or large-scale archaeological evidence of destruction caused by wars or natural disasters makes this collapse one of the most intriguing mysteries of pre-Columbian North America. Why did such a powerful and prosperous metropolis fall into disrepair, leaving behind only silent mounds? Traditional or rational hypotheses about the causes of Cahokia mortality usually point to a complex of environmental, social, and political factors. One of the leading theories is resource depletion and environmental degradation. Intensive agriculture, mainly corn cultivation, which supported the city's huge population, could lead to soil erosion and loss of fertility. Large-scale deforestation for the construction of mounds, dwellings, and fuel, especially for firing pottery, could cause deforestation, which in turn led to flooding, changes in the hydrological regime, and loss of biodiversity needed for hunting. Climate change may also have played a role. The period from 1200 to 1350 was characterized by a small ice age, which may have led to a colder and drier climate, which negatively affected corn yields and overall food security. Internal social conflicts and political instability are also considered as possible causes. The growing social stratification, confirmed by the rich burials of the elite and the poverty of ordinary residents, could lead to discontent and uprisings. The sacrifices found in Mound 72, while indicative of elite power, may also indicate attempts to maintain control in a growing crisis. A decrease in population density, possibly due to diseases caused by crowding and sanitation problems in a large city, could also weaken the social structure. Disrupting trade routes or weakening regional ties could also undermine Cahokia's economic base, denying it access to valuable resources and slowing down innovation. These factors acting in a complex could lead to a gradual weakening of the central government and the settlement of the population. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses offer more speculative explanations that go beyond purely materialistic causes. Some researchers suggest that Cahokia's decline may have been due to a spiritual crisis or a change in their religious beliefs, possibly caused by crop failures or unexplained disasters. Perhaps the priests and chieftains have lost the trust of the populace, as their rituals have ceased to produce the desired result. This could lead to the abandonment of monumental construction and centralized power in favor of a more decentralized way of life. There are also suggestions of deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that the inhabitants of Cahokia possess some sacred or technological secret related to their mounds or astronomical knowledge, which they decided to take with them when they left the city, or which were lost in the course of cultural disintegration. Some theories, inspired by the legends of beast men or earth spirits in Native American mythology, suggest that the Cahokians may have encountered some kind of supernatural force or been punished for violating harmony with nature, which led to their disappearance. Versions of extraterrestrial influence also arise in the context of unexplained aspects of pre-Columbian cultures, suggesting that there may have been some external influence which first contributed to their development and then left or ceased its influence. It caused their decline. The lack of clear evidence of mass violence or external intrusions allows these more mystical explanations to retain their appeal to some researchers. The traditions, legends, and myths of the indigenous peoples of North America who lived in the region after the decline of Cahokia, for example, Ilinavek, Osage, and Pony, often contain stories of ancient mound peoples or lost cities inhabited by powerful rulers. These traditions, passed down from generation to generation, are a valuable, if allegorical, source of information about how these ancient sites were perceived by subsequent cultures. Many of these stories tell that ancient cities were abandoned because of the wrath of the gods, diseases, or because people became too proud and forgot about their roots, which led to their dispersal. For example, myths about water people or underground spirits could be associated with floods or environmental changes. These traditions are part of the collective memory of a majestic civilization that disappeared, but left behind grand monuments. They emphasize the idea that history is cyclical and that even the greatest human creations can be consumed by time and nature if the balance is disturbed. The mystery of Cahokia's decline continues to challenge archaeologists, forcing them to rethink the complex relationship between environment, social structure, and beliefs. Will we ever fully understand what led to the disappearance of this great American metropolis? Or will its silent mounds forever retain their secrets, reminding us of the fragility of even the most powerful civilizations? Easter Island, Rapa Nui. Silent faces in a unique culture in an ocean of isolation. Imagine one of the most remote and isolated patches of land on our planet, a small volcanic island in the vast expanses of the South Pacific Ocean, which, despite its extreme geographical location, has become the cradle of a unique, extremely inventive, and highly developed culture. This culture, known to us as the Rapa Nui people, the name given to the island by its native inhabitants, has created some of the most recognizable, majestic, and, without exaggeration, mysterious monuments around the world. Colossal stone statues known as moai. Until the arrival of the first European navigators, in particular the Dutch admiral Jacob Roggeveen in 1722, and then until the beginning of systematic archaeological and ethnographic research in the 20th century, the history of Rapa Nui and its amazing people was in a state of deep, complete oblivion for the rest of the world. The very existence of these giant statues, their size and amazing accuracy, seemed to challenge any logic and ideas about the possibilities of primitive island societies located so far from any sources of external influence. The current state of our understanding of Rapa Nui culture is constantly being deepened with each new archaeological discovery and genetic research. But the central, most painful mystery, what exactly led to the catastrophic collapse of this unique civilization, still causes fierce scientific and public debate, becoming an instructive and sometimes disturbing warning to all mankind about the fragility of ecosystems and civilizations. The heyday of Rapa Nui culture, its golden age, occurred in the period from about the X to the 15th century AD, when the inhabitants of the island reached the peak of their development, creating phenomenal architectural and artistic masterpieces that still amaze the imagination. The main and by far the most famous symbol of this culture is, of course, the moai. These giant monolithic statues are elaborately carved from volcanic tuff, of which there are almost 1,000 on the island. Some of them reach impressive dimensions, up to 10 meters in height and weigh more than 80 tons, and one unfinished statue in the quarry exceeds 20 meters. The vast majority of moai were carved in a single, specialized quarry, Rano Raraku, which is itself a unique archaeological site that demonstrates the scale of production. Then, in some still unsolved and incomprehensible way, these colossal stone giants were moved many kilometers across the rugged terrain of the island and installed on ceremonial stone platforms called ahu, which were located mainly along the coast. The sacred significance of these statues was profound and multifaceted. It is believed that the moai depicted deified ancestors or important leaders who continued to protect their clans even after death. They served as powerful symbols of their power, spiritual power, known as mana in Polynesian cultures, and provided protection to communities by looking inside the island rather than towards the ocean, which indicates their internal protective role. The moai's eyes, made of white coral with obsidian or red tuff pupils, were inserted only after the statues were successfully installed on ahu, which probably symbolized their revival, giving them spirit or activating their spiritual power and ability to observe the world. In addition to the moai, Rapa Nui culture has created other unique phenomena that show its complexity and identity. For example, Rongo Rongo is the only known writing system in Oceania, consisting of numerous pictograms and ideograms carved on wooden tablets. Although it has not yet been deciphered and remains one of the greatest linguistic mysteries, its very existence indicates an exceptionally high level of intellectual development and a complex bureaucratic or priestly organization of society. Huge stone ahus were also discovered, which served not only as the foundations for moai, but also as sites for complex rituals, ceremonies, and presumably burials. Some of these platforms reached hundreds of meters in length and included complex masonry, demonstrating a high level of construction skill. The uniqueness of this civilization was that it developed in complete isolation, being cut off from other large land masses for thousands of kilometers. which makes it an ideal laboratory for studying sustainable development, social dynamics, and the collapse of civilizations without external interference. The very idea that the inhabitants could not only carve, but also move such colossal blocks of stone across rough terrain using only primitive tools made of stone, wood, and rope, and relying solely on the muscular strength of huge collectives, has always been admired and deeply puzzled, giving rise to many conjectures about transportation methods and organizational efforts. All this architectural and artistic flourishing was not just a manifestation of creative genius, but also of deep religious beliefs, a powerful social hierarchy where rival clans probably competed to create ever grander moai, seeking to demonstrate their strength and secure the favor of their ancestors, which, as will be shown later, may have been one of the factors that led to the creation of the moai, to their subsequent dramatic decline. Silence of the toppled giants, the mystery of the Rapa Nui collapse, and the echo of ecocide. The main mystery that still shrouds Easter Island in the most dramatic way is the abrupt and seemingly inexplicable collapse of its once thriving, unique civilization. By the time Europeans re-arrived in the mid-18th century, the island's landscape had radically changed. Most of the majestic moai had been overturned, the forests had completely disappeared, the population had plummeted to a few thousand, and the island itself was a barren, desolate area, almost unsuitable for maintaining a large population. The lack of clear, unambiguous, single reasons for such a catastrophic decline has long given rise to many contradictory theories, from tribal wars to mass starvation and epidemics. This mystery has become one of the most striking and, unfortunately, tragic examples of how even highly developed societies, seemingly successfully adapted to their environment, can disappear, leaving behind only silent ruins and questions about their fate. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the collapse of Rapa Nui are largely focused on the concept of ecological catastrophe, or ecocide, which claims that the decline was caused by the island's inhabitants themselves, who overexploited their extremely limited natural environment. The main and most widely accepted theory suggests that the population, in an effort to create more and more moai, demonstrate their power and influence, and to move these colossal statues to the coast, actively and uncontrollably cut down the forests of giant palm trees, Pachalococos disperta, that once covered the island in abundance. The wood of these palms was critically important and was used for a variety of purposes: for the construction of elaborate sleds, rinks, and ropes needed to transport massive statues, for fuel in hearths and for cooking, for the construction of boats vital for fishing, and possibly for maintaining contact with other islands, though eventually isolation. It has become almost complete, as well as for the construction of dwellings and tools. Excessive and rampant deforestation over several centuries led to the complete and irreversible deforestation of the island, which had truly catastrophic and multiplicative consequences. First, it caused large-scale soil erosion. Without forest cover, the fertile upper layers of the soil, rich in nutrients, were quickly washed away by heavy rains and strong winds, which led to a large-scale erosion of the soil. A sharp and fatal decline in the yield of agricultural crops, such as sweet potatoes, and, as a result, mass starvation. Second, the loss of forests led to the extinction of native bird species that were dependent on forest habitat, which deprived the island's inhabitants of another important and valuable source of protein. Third, the lack of large-sized timber made it impossible to build large ocean canoes, which completely interrupted fishing in the open sea and deprived the island of contact with the outside world, effectively turning it into an ecological and cultural trap. Finally, the drastic and catastrophic reduction of resources led to an increase in inter-clan wars and a fierce struggle for the remaining habitable territories and scarce food supplies. This in turn was expressed in a symbolic and real act of violence: the overthrow of moai statues, which were symbols of competing clans and their ancestors, which was an act of destroying the honor and strength of the enemy. Some archaeological finds and analysis of bone remains also point to cases of cannibalism in the late period of decline, which is eerie evidence of extreme despair and hunger. Thus, the dominant traditional view sees the decline of Rapa Nui as a cautionary and dark story about how humanity, by overexploiting its extremely limited habitat for grandiose but ultimately unviable projects, such as the creation and transportation of Moai, can lead itself to self-destruction. Climate change towards a drier or more unstable climate may also have exacerbated this problem, but human impact is considered to be the main cause. Unconventional or alternative hypotheses offer a broader and sometimes speculative view of the causes of collapse, without reducing them solely to human-caused ecocide. Some researchers dispute the idea that palm trees are completely extinct solely because of human activity, pointing out that introduced rodents, Polynesian rats, introduced by the first settlers may have played a significant, if not decisive, role in destroying palm seeds, preventing their natural recovery and contributing to mass deforestation. This shifts some of the blame from direct human exposure to an unintended biological factor. Other theories suggest that the island could have been subject to catastrophic natural events, such as powerful tsunamis caused by underwater earthquakes or volcanic eruptions. Although there is no direct archaeological evidence of such a large-scale, one-stage catastrophe that could destroy the entire civilization. Some proponents of extraterrestrial influence, or ancient astronauts, suggest that the construction of the Moai may have been inspired or even carried out by some external forces or technologies that then left the island, leaving the inhabitants isolated in the face of unsolvable problems, or that the Moai itself was some kind of energy relay that ceased to function. This idea attempts to explain the astounding technologies and scale of construction that seem out of proportion to the primitive resources and tools available to the population. There are also suggestions of deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that the Rapa Nui people possess some sacred knowledge or technology, for example, for moving Moai, that was lost or deliberately destroyed during wars and cultural decline so that it would not fall into the wrong hands. The lack of Rongo decryption supports this idea of lost knowledge. It is possible that the culture itself, having reached its peak, entered a state of karmic retribution, or it has lost its inner spiritual balance and connection to the principles that ensured its prosperity, which has led to its self-destruction. Some researchers also suggest that the conflicts were not only over material resources, but also over ideological dominance, where the overturning of the Moai was not just an act of vandalism, but a deep religious and political suppression of one faction by another. The traditions, legends, and myths of the Rapa Nui people, which have come down to us through oral narratives recorded by European missionaries and explorers, provide valuable, if metaphorical, explanations for their decline. The legends of the long-eared and short-eared, two warring groups that led to a bloody civil war and the final destruction of forests on the island, may be an allegorical but historically accurate reflection of real interclan conflicts and the environmental catastrophe that followed. Stories about the mana, spiritual power, that flowed out of the statues when they were toppled, or how the Moai walked on their own, perhaps using swinging techniques, show how the islanders explain to themselves processes that seem mysterious to us, and how they perceive their own relationships with these stone giants. The myths of Hotu Matu and Apose, the legendary founder of the island, and his great journey across the ocean also highlight the isolated nature of their existence and how they perceive themselves as a separate, unique people, forever connected to their small island. Often associated with gruesome cannibalism rituals during the late period of decline, these tales not only describe events, but also reflect the profound cultural, spiritual, and psychological changes that occurred on the island as a result of the collapse. Thus, Easter Island and its silent Moai remain one of the most instructive and disturbing archaeological lessons in human history. This is not just a story about a lost civilization, but also a powerful reminder of how even in complete isolation, human society can reach incredible heights of technological and cultural development, but also bring itself to the brink of extinction if it violates the fragile balance with the environment. The question of what exactly led to the collapse is not only of academic interest, but also a direct warning to all mankind about the fragility of the balance between development, consumption, and environmental conservation, and that sometimes the biggest and most important mystery that we must solve is the very nature of man and his environment. Ability to self-destruct. Ancient Anu, a forgotten ghost town and the cradle of the Andean civilization. Imagine a vast and mysterious city lying in ruins at an altitude of more than 3,500 meters in the arid but once fertile valleys of the Andes. Long before the majestic Inca Empire appeared, this city, known as Corral Supe or simply Corral, located in central Peru, is the oldest known urban center in the Americas, with its heyday occurring between 2600 and 2000 BC. For thousands of years, its existence was almost completely forgotten by the outside world, and even the locals perceived it as a set of natural hills. Until the end of the 20th century, the accepted scientific paradigm held that civilization in the New World originated in Mesoamerica, with cultures such as the Olmecs, and the Andean civilizations, including the Incas, were more recent. The discovery and systematic excavation of Corral, which began in the 1990s under the leadership of Ruth Shady Solis, completely rewrote this chronology, showing that complex urban societies in the Andes appeared at least 1,000 years earlier than expected and were contemporaneous with the Egyptian pyramids and Mesopotamian cities. The current state of our understanding of Corral continues to deepen with each season of excavation, but many questions about its structure, governance, and causes of decline remain open, making it one of the most intriguing and still not fully understood cradles of civilization. The key features of Corral, which show its amazing complexity and uniqueness, literally challenge our ideas about early civilizations. First of all, it is a grandiose architecture made of stone and mud bricks. 6 large pyramidal structures with rectangular platforms arranged around vast squares. The largest of them, the Major Pyramid, has a base measuring 150 by 160 meters and a height of up to 28 meters. These pyramids were not just places of worship, they were multi-stage platforms with temples, amphitheaters, and elite living quarters at the top, demonstrating the complex hierarchical structure of society. Corral's unique feature is its circular squares, or oval squares, that were often located at the foot of the pyramids and used for mass ceremonies and gatherings, indicating developed social rituals and possibly a complex system of governance based on collective participation. The urban layout of Corral also impresses with its thoughtfulness and correspondence to the landscape. The city was carefully planned with sacred lines and probably astronomical orientations in mind, although the exact details are still being investigated. Archaeological research has revealed the presence of both elite residences and more modest dwellings, as well as extensive storage facilities, which indicates a developed economy based on agriculture, growing cotton, pumpkins, legumes, and, surprisingly, on marine resources. Even though Corral is 23 kilometers off the Pacific coast, much of its diet and economy depended on seafood such as anchovies and sardines, which were probably exchanged for cotton grown in the valley. This relationship between inland agricultural settlements and coastal fishing communities indicates a highly developed system of trade and exchange that linked different ecological zones and contributed to the growth of the city. The sacred significance of Corral stemmed from its role as the main religious and political center of the region. The discovery of musical instruments, flutes made from pelican and condor bones, as well as textile artifacts made from cotton, including intricately woven fabrics and nets, demonstrates not only high handicraft skills, but also their use for ritual purposes. Archaeological finds also include small ritual figurines, ornaments, and offerings that highlight deep religious beliefs and ceremonial life. The lack of clear evidence of large-scale warfare or fortifications in the early Corral period suggests a possibly more peaceful and theocratic form of government, where elite power was based on religious authority and control of resources rather than military strength. This city is living proof that civilization in the Andes developed in parallel with the ancient civilizations of the Old World, with its own unique features and challenges traditional ideas about the ways of human development. The silence of Soup Valley, the mystery of Corral's decline and lost knowledge. The main mystery that shrouds the ancient city of Corral lies in its gradual but inexplicable decline and subsequent desolation by about 1900 BC, when it, like many other centers in the Soup Valley, was abandoned by its inhabitants. After many centuries of prosperity, this majestic city would seem to have simply disappeared from the historical map, leaving only ruins. The lack of clear, unambiguous reasons for such a collapse, such as large-scale wars or catastrophic natural disasters, makes this mystery one of the most intriguing in the history of early American civilizations. What exactly caused the inhabitants to abandon their grandiose cities and once fertile valleys? And why was this knowledge forgotten for millennia? Traditional or rational hypotheses about the causes of the death of Caral usually point to a complex of environmental and climatic factors that gradually undermine the viability of civilization. One of the most likely causes is considered to be climate change, in particular, a long period of drought or, conversely, unpredictable floods caused by changes in weather systems. The Supe Valley, although fertile, depended on a stable water supply from the Andean glaciers and seasonal rains. The disruption of these patterns could lead to a sharp decline in crop yields, especially cotton and food, which undermine the economic basis of society. In addition, changes in Pacific Ocean currents, such as more frequent and intense El Niño events, may have caused shifts in fish migration, leading to a sharp decline in marine resources vital to the Caral economy. Environmental changes caused by overexploitation of the environment, for example, overfishing or changes in the water balance, may also have contributed to the decline. The development of irrigation systems, while contributing to growth, could also make communities vulnerable to changes in water levels or silting up of canals. Declining population densities, possibly due to diseases caused by crowding or the need to relocate in search of resources, may also have weakened the social structure and ability to maintain large-scale infrastructure. Unlike in Mesoamerica, there is no clear evidence of mass wars or invasions in Caral Supa, indicating that the decline was most likely the result of gradual habitat degradation and economic hardship, rather than sudden violence. The population probably gradually migrated to other, more favorable areas, leaving their monumental cities behind. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses attempt to explain the mysterious collapse of the Caral beyond purely materialistic causes. Some researchers suggest that the decline may have been related to a spiritual crisis or a change in their religious beliefs, perhaps caused by crop failures or unexplained disasters that were perceived as signs of the gods' displeasure. Perhaps the priests, whose power was based on controlling rituals and probably astronomical knowledge, lost the trust of the population as their rites ceased to produce the desired result, which led to a loss of faith in centralized power and the decentralization of society. There are also suggestions of a deliberate concealment of knowledge, or that the inhabitants of Caral possessed some sacred or technological secrets related to their architecture, agriculture, or even interaction with the energies of the earth, which were lost or deliberately hidden by the priests before leaving to prevent their use for inappropriate purposes. Theories of extraterrestrial influence also sometimes arise, especially in the context of the remarkable precision and scale of their architecture for such an early era, suggesting that perhaps some external influence, whether it was a direct intervention that contributed to their development and then stopped, or conversely, some destructive influence, caused their decline. The idea of karmic retribution, or that a civilization, having reached a certain peak, has exhausted its resource or violated certain cosmic laws, can also be considered. The silence about Caral Supa in later Andean traditions may be the result of deliberate erasure of a failed project from the point of view of subsequent generations, or of a civilization that could not maintain its existence. Traditions, legends, and myths about Caral Supa are extremely sparse, as this civilization disappeared thousands of years before the appearance of writing and even before the formation of most of the famous Andean cultures, such as the Incas. However, in general terms, Andean mythology has stories about ancient peoples who lived before the Incas, about lost cities that were abandoned due to the wrath of the gods, natural disasters, or internal conflicts. These traditions, often transmitted orally, can be very distant, distorted by the echo of what happened in Caral Supa. For example, myths about dry rivers or the land that stopped yielding crops can be an allegorical reflection of the environmental problems faced by the inhabitants of Caral. The absence of direct references to Caral Supa in late Inca or pre-Inca chronicles is one of the major mysteries, indicating that the memory of it was almost completely erased, perhaps due to a huge time gap or because subsequent cultures simply did not consider it part of their history. These myths, even if they don't point directly to Caral, create an air of mystery and are cultural evidence that the Andes lands hold many forgotten civilizations and their histories waiting to be discovered. Thus, Caral Supi is not only a window into the deep past of Andean civilizations, but also a vivid example of how even advanced societies can face unsolvable problems and disappear, leaving behind only silent ruins. The mystery of its decline continues to challenge archaeologists, forcing us to reflect on the fragility of civilization and how many still unsolved stories the Earth holds. Ancient Göbekli Tepe, the cradle of civilization and the secret of the forgotten builders. Imagine a place that completely reverses our understanding of the origins of civilization, architecture, and even religious beliefs. In the southeast of Turkey, at the top of a hill, lies the archaeological site of Göbekli Tepe, literally pot-bellied hill, whose monumental stone structures predate the emergence of agriculture, metallurgy, and even ceramics. It flourished during the pre-ceramic Neolithic period approximately 9600 to 8200 BC, making it the oldest known megalithic structure in the world. Prior to its discovery in 1994 by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, the accepted scientific paradigm held that complex social structures, centralized labor organization, and monumental construction became possible only after the transition to a sedentary lifestyle and agricultural development, when an abundance of food allowed non-productive workers to be supported and hierarchical societies to be created. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe completely destroyed this theory, showing that our hunter-gatherer ancestors were capable of incredibly complex social organizations, grandiose construction, and possibly complex religious systems thousands of years before the advent of agriculture. This discovery plunged this period of human history into a state of deep scientific oblivion, as it now had to be rethought. The current state of our understanding of Göbekli Tepe is constantly evolving, but many questions about its builders, its true purpose, and the reasons for its final burial remain open, making it one of the greatest archaeological mysteries of the 21st century. The key features of Göbekli Tepe, which attest to its unprecedented antiquity and complexity, are striking and challenge established ideas. Its main symbols are monumental, T-shaped megalith, scarved from local limestone, some of which reach 6 meters in height and weigh up to 20 tons. These megaliths are set in concentric circles, forming at least 20 such structures, although only a small part has been excavated. Many of the T-shaped pillars are carved with intricate reliefs of animals, including wild boars, foxes, snakes, scorpions, cranes, and even spiders, with amazing detail and dynamics. Some pillars have stylized images of human hands and belts, which suggests that the T-shaped pillars represent stylized human figures or anthropomorphic deities. The sacred significance of these structures is indisputable. They clearly served as cult centers or sanctuaries, not residential buildings. The lack of permanent dwellings or traces of large-scale domestic activity inside the temple complex indicates that it was a place where groups of hunter-gatherers came from different regions for joint rituals and ceremonies, possibly related to ancestral worship, totemic beliefs, or the worship of the forces of nature. The findings of numerous broken bones of wild animals, gazelles, taurs, wild donkeys, and the absence of domesticated species confirm that the builders were hunter-gatherers. The technology of creating and moving these megaliths, given the lack of metal tools, wheels, and pets, is one of the greatest mysteries. Megaliths were carved from quarries located near the hill, using primitive stone tools, and then probably moved and installed using solely the muscular strength of hundreds, if not thousands of people. This requires incredible coordination, centralized management, and a well-developed social structure. Göbekli Tepe argues that religious or ritual needs may have been the main driving force for the development of society and technology, preceding the agricultural revolution. Rather than gathering together for farming, People may have first banded together to create sanctuaries, and then the need to feed such a large number of people led to the development of agriculture. The uniqueness of this place lies not only in its antiquity, but also in the way it was deliberately buried after several centuries of use. Around 8200 BC, the structures were methodically buried in earth and rubble, creating an artificial hill that hid them for millennia. The reasons for this mysterious burial are still unknown. Perhaps it was due to climate change, religious beliefs, or the transition to a sedentary lifestyle. Göbekli Tepe forces us to rethink the entire history of civilization, offering a new hypothesis that first there was a temple and then a city, and that spirituality and not just economic factors could be a fundamental reason for the development of human civilization. Buried secrets, the mystery of the Göbekli Tepe burial site, and the whispers of ancient cults. The main mystery that shrouds Göbekli Tepe lies not so much in its creation, but in its mysterious and methodical burial by about 8200 BC. After several hundred years of active use, the monumental shrines were not just abandoned, but carefully and purposefully buried with earth, rubble, layer by layer, which led to the formation of an artificial hill up to 15 meters high, which hid them from the world for thousands of years. This deliberate burial, rather than natural destruction or collapse, raises many questions. Why did the builders spend so much effort to create this place, and then so methodically hide it from view? What events or changes in their society could have led to such a radical decision? Traditional or rational hypotheses about the reasons for the burial of Göbekli Tepe mainly focus on changes in the environment and the development of society, which may have made the use of this cult center impractical or impossible. One of the leading theories is climate change after the end of the last ice age, the so-called Younger Dryas. During this period, approximately 9600–8200 BC, the climate in the region became increasingly warm and humid, which led to the spread of forests and, most importantly, to the emergence and development of agriculture. Perhaps with the transition to sedentary agriculture, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle that allowed groups from different regions to congregate in Göbekli Tepe became less common. People began to settle in villages, cultivate land, and domesticate animals. This could lead to the loss of relevance of Göbekli Tepe as a center for nomadic groups. Its function may have become redundant or incompatible with the new sedentary lifestyle. Another hypothesis suggests that the burial may have been part of a religious or ritual act. Perhaps after a certain period of use, the sanctuaries were deliberately decommissioned or put to death by burying them, which symbolized the end of one era or cycle and the transition to a new one. This could be a way to preserve their sacred power or prevent desecration. The development of a more complex social structure or new religious beliefs may have led to the fact that the old cults of Göbekli Tepe became irrelevant or even contrary to the new order, and they decided to get out of sight, but with respect. It is also possible that the burial was caused by the need to protect the structures from natural influences or from hostile groups, although this is less likely, given the absence of traces of conflicts. It is important to note that the burial process was lengthy and methodical, which excludes a sudden catastrophe. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses, they offer more speculative explanations for this grandiose act of burial. Some proponents of such theories suggest that Göbekli Tepe contained some kind of sacred or technological secrets that were so powerful or dangerous that they had to be hidden from future generations. Perhaps the builders had knowledge that they believed should not have fallen into the hands of the uninitiated, and so they decided to deliberately bury it. This idea often echoes the concept of lost knowledge of ancient civilizations. There are also suggestions of extraterrestrial influence, or that Göbekli Tepe was built under the guidance or inspiration of some external entities, who then left the earth, and people left without their guidance decided to preserve the sanctuary. In this context, burial could be the act of sealing some portal or energy source. The idea of karmic retribution, or that this place was too powerful and its energy could be dangerous to humans, is also found in mystical interpretations. Some researchers suggest that some global catastrophe occurred, such as the fall of a comet or asteroid. For example, the event in Abu Huraira, which coincided with the Younger Dryas, and could cause dust clouds, and the burial was a way of protection from external influences or an attempt to preserve the shrine for future generations when conditions become favorable. In this case, it would be an act of hope and preservation. Legends, and myths about Göbekli Tepe are not directly present, since it was forgotten long before the appearance of writing and even before the formation of most of the known mythologies that we study. However, in a broader sense, in the mythologies of the peoples of the Middle East and Mesopotamia, which developed much later, there are general motifs about the lost gardens of paradise, about the golden age before the flood or great catastrophes, about divine intervention in the early history of mankind, and about the secret places where ancient knowledge was stored. For example, some researchers draw parallels between Göbekli Tepe and the biblical Garden of Eden, suggesting that it may have been one of the places where the first conscious worship of the deity originated. Myths about the creation of the world and about the first people, as well as about great structures built not by people, but by gods or giants, can be very distant, distorted echoes of the collective memory of places like Göbekli Tepe. These traditions, although they do not provide direct answers, create an atmosphere of mystery and are cultural evidence that humanity has always sought explanations for its origin and first steps to civilization. And places like Göbekli Tepe have profoundly influenced these ideas, even being forgotten for millennia. Thus, Göbekli Tepe is not only a testament to the amazing abilities of our prehistoric ancestors, but also a source of profound questions about our roots. The mystery of its burial remains one of the most intriguing aspects, leading us to wonder why entire civilizations might deliberately hide their greatest achievements, leaving them to await future discoveries. Will we ever be able to decipher the true code of this ancient sanctuary and understand what exactly caused its creators to commit such a grand act of oblivion? Ancient Jericho, the oldest city on Earth, and its mysterious walls. Imagine a city whose roots go back to the very depths of the Neolithic Revolution, a city that has existed continuously for almost 10,000 years, enduring epochs, empires, and catastrophes, and which is rightfully considered the oldest continuously inhabited city on Earth. This is Jericho, located in the fertile Jordan Valley, north of the Dead Sea, in the territory of the modern Palestinian state. Its heyday as the first proto-city dates back to the pre-ceramic Neolithic B, PPNB, from about 8500 to 7500 BC, when it was already a large settlement with a unique monumental architecture for that time. Prior to systematic archaeological excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries, Jericho was known mainly for biblical stories, in particular the story of the trumpets of Jericho that destroyed its walls. The scientific community has long been skeptical about the possibility of such complex settlements at such an early stage of human development, believing that urban life originated much later in Mesopotamia. The discovery of Jericho's powerful defenses and complex architecture has completely changed these perceptions, placing it at the center of the study of the origins of urbanization and social complexity. It was in a state of historical oblivion for archaeologists, as its ruins were buried under many layers of subsequent settlements, creating a giant tell, a hill formed by layers of ancient cities. But it was well known from religious texts, which brought to its study a unique conflict between faith and science. The current state of our understanding of Jericho continues to evolve with each new excavation season, but many questions about its true purpose, power structure, and causes of decline remain open, making it one of the most significant and mysterious places in human history. The key features of ancient Jericho, which attest to its unprecedented development for its time, amaze the imagination and challenge the established ideas about Neolithic societies. The main symbols of its early greatness are its monumental stone walls and round tower, which date back to about 8,000–7,000 BC. These Jericho walls, which reach 3 to 5 meters in height and 1.5–2 meters in thickness, were built of raw stone, bonded with clay mortar. Inside these walls were residential buildings made of mud bricks, which indicates a high degree of organization and collective labor. Even more impressive is the Tower of Jericho, a 9-meter round tower made of stone, built into the wall and having an internal staircase of 22 steps leading to the top. The construction of such structures in an era when people were just beginning to develop agriculture and did not have developed tools is a phenomenal achievement of engineering thought and organization. The purpose of these walls and towers is still a matter of debate. While they certainly could have served defensive purposes against external threats, some researchers suggest that their functions were also symbolic or ritualistic. The tower may have been used for astronomical observations related to the agricultural calendar or religious ceremonies, possibly as an early temple or center of worship. It could also serve as a symbol of the power and unity of the community, demonstrating its strength and ability to build on a large scale. Jericho was not just a settlement, but a full-fledged proto-city with an estimated population of several thousand people. Its economy was based on early agriculture, growing wheat, barley, and lentils, and pastoralism, domesticating goats, supplemented by hunting and gathering. The fertile soil and abundant freshwater sources, especially the powerful Ain as Sultan Spring, made it an ideal place for a settled life. The sacred significance of Jericho is evident in the finds of sculptural images of human skull, covered with clay and painted, often with shells inserted instead of eyes. These ancestral skulls were discovered under house floors and probably served as ancestral cults or as part of worship rituals, highlighting deep spiritual beliefs and connections to the past. The presence of specialized crafts, obsidian processing, tool production, and trade links with remote regions, import of obsidian from Anatolia, indicates a developed economy and social organization. Jericho is a unique example of how humanity at the dawn of the Neolithic was already capable of creating complex urban centers, monumental architecture, and advanced social structures that preceded and perhaps even contributed to the further agricultural revolution. It was a beacon of urbanization in a world that was just beginning to move away from nomadic lifestyles, and is invaluable evidence of how early humanity began to create permanent and complex societies. Secrets of destruction and rebirth, the mystery of the Jericho walls and its endless history. The main mystery that continues to shroud Jericho lies not only in the causes of its early decline and rebirth, but also in the historical authenticity of the biblical account of the destruction of its walls to the sound of Joshua's trumpets. For thousands of years, biblical history has been the only source of information about the power and subsequent destruction of Jericho. The lack of direct archaeological evidence for just such a catastrophic event during the period traditionally attributed to the exodus of the Jews from Egypt creates a deep conflict between religious belief and scientific evidence, forcing a rethinking of both history and the interpretation of sacred texts. Jericho is a city that has died and been reborn dozens of times, and each layer of its body holds a new mystery about the causes of these cycles. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the destruction of Jericho and its decline in different periods of history offer many explanations based on archaeological data. As for the biblical destruction, archaeological excavations have shown that the walls of Jericho actually existed during the Neolithic period, as described above, and the city went through periods of destruction and rebuilding. However, the powerful walls described in the Bible do not belong to the Bronze Age, approximately 1400 to 1200 BC, when according to the biblical chronology, the Exodus should have occurred. The walls of this period were much less impressive. Moreover, some archaeological evidence suggests that Jericho may have been a small or even uninhabited settlement during this period, or that its walls were destroyed long before Joshua's supposed arrival. Thus, most modern archaeologists believe that the biblical account of the destruction of the walls of Jericho, although based on ancient ruins, is most likely an etiological myth or allegorical description that does not correspond to the literal historical chronology or scale of events attributed to the biblical period. The destruction of the city in other periods, such as the early Bronze Age, was most likely the result of earthquakes. The Jordan Valley region is seismically active, or military conflicts with neighboring peoples, which is a typical scenario for ancient cities in the Middle East. Depletion of water resources, climate change, or economic factors may also have contributed to periodic declines. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses. The destruction of the Jericho walls, especially in the context of the biblical story, continues to attract attention. One of these hypotheses, directly derived from the biblical text, states that the destruction of the walls was a miracle caused by divine intervention, and therefore does not lend itself to the usual archaeological explanations. The trumpets of Jericho are seen as a supernatural weapon, not as a conventional military action. Some proponents of this view are looking for indirect archaeological evidence that could be interpreted as confirming this miracle, such as the absence of obvious signs of a siege or unusual wall collapses. Other theories, without denying the scientific approach, try to find natural phenomena that could be interpreted as a miracle. For example, a powerful earthquake that occurred at the right moment could bring down walls, and this event could be perceived by ancient people as a direct divine intervention. Seismic activity in the Jordan Valley is high, and major earthquakes have occurred there throughout history. There are also suggestions of hidden technologies or forgotten knowledge that the ancient civilities may have possessed, allowing them to manipulate sound or vibrations in such a way as to destroy stone structures, which could be interpreted as a miracle. This idea is often intertwined with concepts of extraterrestrial influence, suggesting that alien technology or beings may have been the source of miracles or unusual abilities that the ancients possessed. Finally, mystical interpretations may view Jericho as a place with a special energy, where spiritual forces were particularly strong, and its destruction was part of a great cosmic plan or karmic retribution for some actions of the inhabitants. Thus, even if science does not find direct evidence for the biblical version, mystical hypotheses offer their own explanations, emphasizing that not all past events can be explained only in a materialistic way. Traditions, legends, and myths about Jericho, especially the biblical narrative, are central to the cultural memory of this city. The story of Joshua and the fall of the walls of Jericho is not just a myth, it is a fundamental part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, symbolizing divine intervention and the victory of faith. This tradition has shaped the perception of Jericho for centuries as a city of wonders and a sacred land. However, in addition to the biblical texts, there are also local Arabic traditions. They often associate Jericho with ancient kings, prophets, and saints, describing it as a place where extraordinary events took place and where the earth holds many unsolved secrets. These legends sometimes mention curses associated with the destruction of the city or hidden treasures that are waiting in the wings. On the other hand, modern archaeological studies that constantly dig up these traditions show that the history of Jericho is much more complex and multi-layered than a single biblical story. Each layer of his body, each newly excavated house or wall, adds new chapters to his millennial biography, showing the cycles of his prosperity, decline, and incredible rebirth. Jericho, therefore, becomes not just an archaeological site, but a living symbol of eternity and the indissoluble connection of humanity with its past, a place where faith meets science and ancient myths collide with modern discoveries, forcing us to search for deeper meanings in the history that was written in stone. Derinkuyu Underground City, a multi-level shelter in the enigma of ancient engineers. Imagine an entire city carved deep underground, consisting of dozens of floors, branching tunnels, living quarters, kitchens, wine cellars, stables, schools, chapels, and even ventilation shafts reaching to the surface. This is Derinkuyu, which means deep well in Turkish, one of dozens and possibly hundreds of underground cities discovered in the volcanic region of Cappadocia in central Turkey. Its heyday as a multifunctional shelter falls during the Byzantine Empire, approximately 7th centuries AD, although the earliest layers date back to much earlier times, possibly as early as the 8th century BC, when Phrygians lived in the region. Until its accidental discovery in 1963 by a local resident who discovered a passage behind the wall of his basement, Derinkuyu was completely forgotten by the world. Its vast scale and complexity remained unknown, and its entrance was carefully disguised. Even for the locals themselves, this place was more of a legend than a reality. Their daily lives flowed over hundreds of kilometers of unknown underground labyrinths. The current state of our understanding of Derinkuyu and other Cappadocian underground cities is constantly being deepened. But many questions about the exact purpose of some of the rooms, their construction methods, and how the lives of thousands of people underground functioned over long periods, remain open, making it one of the most fascinating and mysterious engineering wonders of the ancient world. Derinkuyi's key features, which attest to its astounding complexity and the engineering genius of its ancient builders, challenge our understanding of the possibilities of ancient civilizations. Derinkuyu is not just a cave, but a multi-level metropolis that can accommodate an estimated 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies for a few months. Its depth reaches approximately 85 meters, and it consists of 11 to 12, and possibly more, underground levels carved into soft volcanic tuff. Each level is connected by narrow, sometimes sloping tunnels that could be easily blocked. The main feature of the city was its complex security system. Each level and even individual tunnels could be hermetically sealed from the inside with huge, massive stone doors, millstone, that weighed up to 500 kilograms and could only be pushed into place on one side. These doors, which had a hole in the center, probably for observation or thrusting a spear through, were practically impregnable from the outside, making the city an ideal refuge from external threats. Another engineering marvel is the sophisticated ventilation system. Derinkuyu is equipped with more than 15,000 ventilation shafts, the deepest of which reaches the surface from a depth of 85 meters, providing fresh air even at the lowest levels. These mines could also serve as a source of water from underground aquifers. The sacred significance of Derinkuyu was undoubtedly related to its function as a refuge. It was a place where the inhabitants could find refuge from the constant invasions and wars that ravaged Anatolia for thousands of years, from the invasions of the Persians, Arabs, Mongols, to internal conflicts. Christians, who made up a significant part of the population of Cappadocia during the Byzantine period, used these cities to protect themselves from persecution. The discovery of chapels, mission schools, and even baptisms inside Derinkuyu underscores its role as a spiritual and cultural center during the shelter. Here life continued. People ground grain, large stone millstones were found, kept cattle in specially equipped stalls, produced wine presses were found, and even trained. Derinkuyu and other underground cities were a testament to the incredible ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit in the face of constant danger. Their construction required a deep knowledge of geology and a huge amount of effort, as each cubic meter of rock was cut by hand using simple tools and then brought to the surface, which in itself is a monumental engineering feat. Dark corridors and ulterior motives. The mystery of Derinkuyu's destination and collapse. The main mystery that continues to shroud Derinkuyu and other underground cities in Cappadocia lies not only in how they were built with such amazing complexity, but also in the true reasons for their massive and long-term use, as well as the reasons for their final desolation. Why did people choose to live in these dark, claustrophobic mazes for centuries? And what ultimately led them to leave these shelters for good? The lack of direct written sources detailing the daily life and events that took place in these cities gives rise to a lot of speculation and unsolved questions. Traditional or rational hypotheses about the purpose and reasons for using Derinkuyu clearly indicate the need to protect against external threats and military incursions. The history of Anatolia is a history of constant wars and migrations. From the 8th century BC, when the first strata may have emerged, the region was threatened by the Assyrians, then the Persians, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Mongols, Seljuks, and Ottomans. In particular, during the Byzantine period, 7th centuries AD, Cappadocia was often raided by Arab armies. The underground cities of Derinkuyu and similar ones, for example Kaymakli, Ozkonak, served as ideal shelters, allowing thousands of people to hide for months, waiting out sieges and looting on the surface. These cities were designed for autonomous existence, with a well-thought-out ventilation system, water sources, wells reaching the groundwater, extensive storage facilities for food, livestock facilities, which allowed for the preservation of food and valuables. The huge stone millstone doors that could block the passageways were an effective defense against attackers who couldn't enter the mazes and were forced to wait on the surface. Thus, these cities were vital tools for survival in the face of constant instability and violence. Their gradual abandonment in later periods is probably due to the establishment of relative peace and stability in the region, when the need for such large-scale shelters disappeared. With the threat gone, life on the surface was undoubtedly more comfortable and productive. Unconventional or mystical hypotheses about the purpose of Derinkuyu and the motives of its builders offer more speculative and profound explanations. Some proponents of such theories suggest that these underground cities were not just shelters, but places where sacred knowledge or ancient technologies were stored, which had to be hidden from the eyes of the uninitiated or from destruction. They may have served as centers of secret cults, esoteric schools, or shelters for holders of ancient, now-forgotten knowledge in times of upheaval. The idea of portals or energy nodes also arises. Some mystics suggest that these tunnels and cavities could be connected to special energy fields of the Earth, and their use had not only practical, but also spiritual meaning, perhaps for meditation or contact with the underground worlds. There are also suggestions of extraterrestrial influence, or that these gigantic underground structures were built under the direction or with the help of technologies transmitted by some external entities. Proponents of this theory point to incredible engineering solutions and a huge amount of work, which in their opinion seem disproportionate to the primitive tools available to ancient builders. In this context, Derinkuyu may have been not just a safe haven, but part of a more global network of shelters or bases designed to survive in the face of some cosmic or planetary catastrophe. Finally, some mystical interpretations may view Derinkuyu as a place of karmic retribution, or conversely, salvation for those who were forced to hide from the outside world, and its desolation as a sign that the period of trials is over, or conversely, that the purpose of these shelters has been exhausted. Legends and myths about the underground cities of Cappadocia are quite common among the local population, although they are often mixed with real historical events and Christian legends. Local residents pass down stories from generation to generation about secret passages leading deep underground, about shadow people or underground spirits who inhabited these labyrinths, as well as about treasures hidden in their unknown depths. Many of these legends relate to dark times of war and persecution, when people went underground like moles to escape. Christian traditions often say that these underground cities served as a refuge for early Christians fleeing Roman persecution, and that they were places where divine services were secretly performed and sacred relics were kept. These stories highlight the deep connection of these places to survival, faith, and hope. There are also more general myths about underground worlds or entrances to the underworld that may be inspired by these intricate tunnels. These traditions, while not providing direct archaeological answers, shape the cultural landscape around Derinkuyu, imbuing it with an atmosphere of mystery, survival, and ancient knowledge that may still be waiting to be fully revealed. Thus, Derinkuyu is not only a testament to the incredible ingenuity and resilience of the human spirit, but also a source of profound questions about our ancestors. The mystery of its large-scale use and eventual desolation continues to challenge archaeologists, forcing us to think about the limits of human adaptation and how many still unsolved stories the Earth holds under our feet. Will we ever be able to fully understand all the functions of this grand underground city and the true reasons why it was created and eventually abandoned? We have taken a fascinating and sometimes mind-boggling journey into the depths of time, exploring the most mysterious and grandiose archaeological discoveries that challenge our understanding of humanity's past. From the silent, fearsome faces of the terracotta army guarding the eternal sleep of the first Chinese emperor, to the ancient megalithic circles of Göbekli Tepe, built by hunter-gatherers long before the advent of agriculture, each discovery tells us about the incredible achievements, deep beliefs, and sometimes tragic destinies of civilizations whose memory has been erased by time. We've seen astounding feats of engineering, such as the giant earth mounds of Cahokia in North America or the multi-level underground cities of Derinkuyu in Cappadocia, attesting to the human capacity for large-scale organization and survival in the harshest of environments. We touch on the mysteries of lost languages like the Indic script and the mysteries of cultures whose existence completely rewrote the history books, like the Japanese Zen culture, which proved that sedentary life and pottery could exist without agriculture. And of course, we reflected on the cautionary but grim history of Easter Island, which was a warning about the fragility of ecosystems and the dangers of rampant growth. These stories are not just a collection of facts and dates. They are the silent call of the past that continues to resonate in our present. Every found ruin, every artifact, every ancient skull or overturned monolith is a fragment of a once living world that is waiting for its voice to be heard. These mysteries teach us humility in the face of time, showing that even the most powerful empires and flourishing cultures can disappear, leaving only riddles in their wake. They also inspire us by demonstrating the incredible ingenuity, adaptability, spiritual depth, and social complexity of our ancestors, who used primitive tools to create wonders that rivaled the achievements of modern times. Behind every hypothesis, traditional or unconventional, behind every scientific discovery and ancient legend, there is an unquenchable human desire to understand who we are, where we came from, and what awaits us. These archaeological riddles don't just tell us about the past, they ask questions about our future. Can we avoid the mistakes made by vanished civilizations? Will we be able to maintain harmony with nature, as some ancient cultures did? And how many more unsolved stories and forgotten worlds are waiting in the wings, buried under layers of earth, water, or oblivion? As long as there are riddles, there will also be a thirst for discovery. The silent call of the past never ceases. It only waits for new researchers, new technologies, and new minds ready to listen to its whispers and collect disparate fragments into a complete, amazing picture of human history. And as long as this call is heard, our journey into the secrets of the past will continue, promising endless discoveries and eternal wonder.